This is going to be really fun because I'm fucking awful at reading. I don't know why you guys have picked this, considering I can't even read fucking games when we're reading on stream, so, you know. Maybe turn it down a smidge. Yeah, I can do that. Boop. Yeah, this thing is... Yes, I have the Lost World. Bugger off. It is 458 pages. According to the internet, it will take me, 9 hours. Smiley, hi! Come for the easy streams. The nice calm ones. No action. Only calm. Though my head is starting to go. Well, my head's been going all day, so I don't know what, It's just, maybe I do need it. It's so heavy. No wonder I never used this. I have to, just cup Grandma by the face. I'm sorry, Grandma. No, you don't. Shush. Right. Right. Let's do this. Introduction. The InGen Incident. The late 20th century has witnessed a scientific gold rush of astonishing proportions. The headlong and furious haste to commercialize genetic engineering. This enterprise has proceeded so rapidly, with so little outside commentary, that its dimensions and implications are hardly understood at all. Biotechnology promises the greatest revolution in human history. By the end of the decade, it will have outdistanced atomic power and computers in its effect on our everyday lives. You just see the chat moving. Well, that makes sense why they have Libby. Did he make... Adam, did you make one just so you could support Libby? I mean, I actually also support it. Shit. In the words of one observer, biotechnology is going to transform every aspect of human life. Our medical care, our food, our health, our entertainment, our very bodies. Nothing will ever be the same again. It's literally going to change the face of the planet. He's been in my house both times. We've been having great fun. That's cute, though. But the biotechnology revolution differs in 3 important respects from past scientific transformations. First, it is broad-based. America entered the atomic age through the work of a single research institution at Los Alamos. Yeah, sure. It entered the computer age through the efforts of a dozen companies, but biotechnology research is now carried out in more than 2,000 laboratories in America alone. 500 corporations spend $5 billion a year on this technology. He's here to support. Yay! I know if I already had an account, so just actually got around to using Twitch on my iPhone. Smart. I have Twitch there, I have Twitch here. Second, much of the research is thoughtless or frivolous. Efforts to engineer paler trout for better visibility in the stream, square trees for easier lumbering, and injectable scent cells so you'll always smell of your favourite perfume may seem like a joke, but they are not. Indeed, the fact that biotechnology can be applied to the industries traditionally, subject to the vagaries of fashion, sure, such as cosmetics or leisure activities, heightens concern about the whimsical use of this powerful new technology. Third, the work is uncontrolled. No one supervises it. No federal law regulates it. There is no coherent government policy, in America or anywhere else in the world. And because the products of biotechnology range from drugs to farm crops to artificial snow... I missed an entire button on my t-shirt. Fuck. An intelligent policy is difficult. But most disturbing is the fact that no watchdogs are found among scientists themselves. It is remarkable that nearly every scientist in genetic research is also engaged in the commerce of biotechnology. There are no detached observers. Everyone has a stake. That's a different. Yeah, It's fun. It's one. It's hidden by the book, and it would be off camera anyway. The commercialization of molecular biology is the stunning ethical event in the history of science, and it has happened with astonishing speed. For 400 years since Galileo, science has always preceded a free and open inquiry into the workings of nature. Scientists have always ignored national boundaries, holding themselves above the transitory concerns of politics and even wars. Scientists have always rebelled against secrecy in research and have even frowned on the idea of patenting their discoveries, seeing themselves as working to the benefit of all mankind. And for many generations, the discovery of scientists did indeed have a peculiar selfless quality. That's what I've been trying to work out. Not showing on either iPad or iPhone. Oh. Interesting. Twitch does seem to be broken half the time. When in 1953, two young researchers in England, James Watson and Francis Crick, deciphered the structure of DNA, their work was hailed as a triumph of the human spirit, of the centuries-old quest to understand the universe in a scientific way. It was confidently expected that the discovery would be selflessly extended to the greater benefit of mankind. Yet that did not happen. 30 years later, nearly all of Watson and Crick's scientific colleagues were engaged in another sort of enterprise entirely. Research in molecular genetics had become a vast multi-billion-dollar commercial undertaking, and its origins can be traced not to 1953, but to April 1976. This was the date of a now famous meeting in which Robert Swanson, a venture capitalist, approached Herbert Boyer, a biochemist at the University of California. The two men agreed to found a commercial company to exploit Boyer's gene splicing techniques. Their new company, Genentech, quickly became the largest and most successful of the genetic engineering startups. Suddenly it seemed as if everyone wanted to become rich. New companies were almost announced weekly, and scientists flocked to exploit genetic research. By 1986, at least 362 scientists, including 64 in the National Academy, sat down on the advisory boards of biotech firms. The number of those who held equity positions or consultancies, was several times greater. It is necessary to emphasize how significant the shift in attitude really was. In the past, pure scientists took a snobbish view of business. They saw the pursuit of money as intellectually uninteresting, suited only to shopkeepers. And to do research for industry, even as the prestigious Bell or IBM labs, was only for those who couldn't get a university appointment. Thus, the attitude of pure scientists was fundamentally critical toward the work of applied scientists, and to the industry in general. The long-standing antagonism kept university students free of contaminating industry ties, and whenever debate arose about technological matters, disinterested scientists were available to discuss the issues at the highest levels. But that is no longer true. There are very few molecular biologists and very few research institutions without commercial affiliations. The old days are gone. Genetic research continues at a more furious pace than ever, but is done in secret and in haste and for profit. In the commercial climate, it is probably inevitable that a company as ambitious as International Genetic Technologies, Inc. of Palo Alto would arise. It is equally unsurprising that the genetic crisis it created should go unreported. After all, InGen's research was conducted in secret. The actual incident occurred in the most remote region of Central America, and fewer than 20 people were there to witness it. Of those, only a handful survived. Even at the end, when International Genetic Technologies filed for Chapter 11 protection in San Francisco Superior Court on October 5, 1989, the proceedings drew little press attention. It appeared so ordinary. InGen was the third small American bioengineering company to fail that year and the seventh since 1986. Few court documents were made public since the creditors were Japanese investment consortia, such as names I'm not going to pronounce, companies were traditionally shunned publicly. To avoid unnecessary disclosure, Daniel Ross of Cohen, Swain and Ross, counsel for InGen, also represented the Japanese investors. And the rather unusual petition of the Vice Consul of Costa Rica were heard behind closed doors. Thus, it is not surprising that within a month, the problems of InGen were quietly and I can never fucking do it, settled. Parties of the settlement, including the distinguished scientific board advisors, signed a non-disclosure agreement, and none will speak about what happened. But many of the principal figures that in the InGen incident are not signatories, and were willing to discuss the remarkable events leading up to those 2 final days in August 1989 on a remote island off the west coast of Costa Rica. We thought you would realise yes, I was too locked into racing. Shimp didn't help with the racing. Oof, called out. Called out being shit at racing. How did I lose a page? Jesus. Is it really just that? No, there's still... Okay. So is this bit, like, set after? That bit is the introduction. Now you'll get the next bit when you read the words prologue. The bite of the raptor. So the introduction is basically, hey, there was a big old catastrophe, but it's been hush-hush. And then it will go into what happened. So yeah. Prologue, the bite of the raptor. The tropical rain fell in drenching sheets. This is why I don't like reading. Hammering the corrugated roof of the clinic building, roaring down the metal gutters, splashing on the ground in a torrent. I need to move the mic. I'm fucking seeing double things. I'm gonna have to just not be in my way. There we go. You know, I fucking hate words. Roaring down the metal gun, blah blah blah, splashing on the ground in a torrent. Yeah. Roberta Carter sighed and stared out the window. From the clinic, she could hardly see the beach or the ocean beyond, cloaked in a low fog. This wasn't what she had expected when she'd come to the fishing village of Bahia? Bahia. And let's say Anasco. Yeah, sure, why not? Off the west coast of Costa Rica, to spend 2 months as a visiting physician. Bobby Carter had expected sun and relaxation after 2 grueling years of residency in emergency medicine and Michael Reese in Chicago. She had been in Bahia now for 3 weeks, and it had rained every day. Everything else was fine. She liked the isolation of Bahia. I'm not fucking reading the full name every time. And the friendliness of the people. Costa Rica had one of the 20 best medical systems in the world, and even in this remote coastal village, the clinic was well maintained, amply supplied. Her paramedic, Manuel Argon, was intelligent and well trained. Bobby was able to practice a level of medicine equal to what she had practiced in Chicago. But the rain, the constant, unending rain. Across the examining room, Manuel cocked his head. "Listen," he said. "Believe me, I hear it," Bobby said. "No. Listen." And then she caught it. Another sound blended with the rain, a deeper rumble that built and emerged until it was clear. The rhythmic thumping of a helicopter. She thought, they can't be flying in weather like this. But the sound built steadily, and then the helicopter burst low through the ocean fog and roared overhead, circled, and came back. She saw the helicopter swing back over the water, near the fishing boats, then ease sideways to the rickety wooden dock and back towards the beach. It was looking for a place to land. It was a big-bellied sicker sky, sure, with a big helicopter with a blue stripe on the side with the words InGen Construction. That was the name of the construction company building a new resort on one of the offshore islands. The resort was said to be spectacular and very complicated. Many of the local people were employed in the construction, which had been going on for more than 2 years. Bobby could imagine it. One of those huge American resorts with swimming pools and tennis courts where guests could play and drink their daiquiris without having a contact with the real life of the country. Bobby wondered what was so urgent on the island that the helicopter would fly in this weather. Through the windshield, she saw the pilot exhale in relief as the helicopter settled on the wet sand of the beach. Uniformed men jumped out and flung open the big side door. She heard frantic shouts in Spanish and Manuel nudged her. They were calling for a doctor. 2 black crewmen carried a limp body toward her while a white man barked orders. The white man had a yellow slicker. Red hair appeared around the edges of his baseball cap. So why did we decide to do this recent stream? Because Laura and Waz kept asking for it. So that's why we're here for these next few streams of reading ones. Where did I get to? Is there a doctor here? He called to her as she ran up. I'm Dr. Carter, she said. The rain fell in heavy drops, pounding her head and shoulders. The red-haired man frowned at her. She was wearing cut-off jeans and a tank top. She had a stethoscope around her shoulder. The bell already rusted from the salt air. Ed Regis, and we've got a very sick man here, doctor. Then you better take him to San Jose, she said. San Jose was the capital, just 20 minutes by air. We would, but we can't get over the mountains in this weather. You have to treat him here. Bobby trotted alongside the injured man as they carried him to the clinic. He was a kid, no older than 18. Lifting away the blood-soaked shirt, she saw a big slashing rip along his shoulder and another on his leg. What happened to him? Construction accident, Ed shouted. He fell. One of the back shoes ran over him. The kid was pale, shivering, unconscious. Manuel stood by the bright green door of the clinic, waving his arm. The men brought the body through and set it on the table in the center of the room. Manuel started an... here we go, medical terms. Intravenous? Yeah, let's go with that line. And Bobby swung the light over the kid and bent to examine the wounds. Immediately, she could see that it did not look good. The kid would almost certainly die. A big tearing laceration ran from his shoulder down his torso. At the edge of the wound, the flesh was shredded. At the center, the shoulder was dislocated, pale bones exposed. A second slash cut through the heavy muscles of the thigh, deep enough to reveal the pulse of the femoral artery below. First impression was that his leg had been ripped open. Tell me again about this injury, she said. I didn't see it, Ed said. They said the backhoe dragged him because it almost looks like as if he was mauled. Bobby Carter said, and probing the wound. Like most emergency room physicians, she could remember in detail patients she had seen even years before. She had seen 2 maulings. One was a 2-year-old child who had been attacked by a Rottweiler dog. The other was a drunken circus attendant who had an encounter with a Bengal tiger. Both injuries were similar. There was a characteristic look to an animal attack. Mauled? Nah, it was a backhoe. Believe me. Ed licked his lips as he spoke. He was edgy, acting as if he had done something wrong. He had. Bobby wondered why. If they were using inexperienced local workmen on the resort construction, they must have accidents all the time. Manuel said, Do you want lavage? Yes, she said, after you block him. She bent lower, probed the wound with her fingertips. If an earth mover had rolled over him, dirt would be forced deep into the wound. But there wasn't any dirt. Just slippery, slimy foam. And the wound had a strange odour. Kind of rotten stench, a smell of death and decay. She had never smelled anything like it before. How long ago did this happen? An hour. Again, she noticed how tense Ed Regis was. He was one of those eager, nervous types, and he didn't look like a construction foreman, more like an executive. He was obviously out of his depth. Bobby Carter turned back to the injuries. Somehow she didn't think she was seeing a mechanical trauma. It just didn't look right. No soil contamination of the wound site and no crush injury component. Mechanical trauma of any sort, an auto injury, a factory incident, almost always has some component of crushing, but there was none. Instead, the man's skin was shredded, ripped across his shoulder and again on his thigh. It really did look like a mole. On the other hand, most of the body was unmarked, which was unusual for an animal attack. She looked again at the head, the arms, the hands. The hands. She felt a chill when she looked at the kid's hands. There were short, slashing cuts on both hands and bruising on the wrists and forearms. She had worked in Chicago long enough to know what that meant. "All right," she said. "Wait outside." "Why?" Ed said, alarmed. He didn't like that. "Do you want me to help him or not?" she said, and pushed him out of the door and closed it on his face. She didn't know what was going on, but she didn't like it. Manuel hesitated. I continue to wash?" "Yes," she said. She reached for her little Olympus point and shoot. She took several snapshots of the injury, shifting her light for a better view. It really did look like bites, she thought. Then the kid groaned, and she put the camera aside and bent towards him. His lips moved, his tongue thick. "Raptor," he said. "Velociraptor." At the words, Manuel froze and stepped back in horror. "What does it mean?" Bobby said. Manuel shook his head. "I do not know, Doctor." "Velociraptor? No es español." "No." Sounded like, to her, like Spanish. "Then please continue to wash him." "No, Doctor." He wrinkled his nose. Bad smell, and he crossed himself. Bobby looked again at the slippery foam streaked across the wound. She touched it, rubbing between her fingers. Seemed almost like saliva. The injured boy's lips moved. "Raptor," he whispered. In a tone of horror, Manuel said, "It bit him." "What bit him?" "Raptor." "What's a raptor?" "It means whoopia." Yeah, great. I'm so glad Spanish is in this. Bobby frowned. The Costa Ricans were not specially superstitious, but she had heard the mentioned. Let's say hoopia. Hoopia seems. We'll say hoopia. Mentioned in the village before. They were said to be night ghosts, faceless vampires who kidnap small children. According to the belief, the hoopia had once lived in the mountains of Costa Rica, but now inhabited the islands offshore. Manuel was backing away, murmuring and crossing himself. "It is not normal, this smell," he said. "It is the hoopia." Bobby was about to order him back to work when the injured youth opened his eyes and sat up straight on the table. Manuel shrieked in terror. The injured boy moaned and twisted his head left to right with his wide eyes staring, and then he explosively vomited blood. He went immediately into convulsions, his body vibrating, and Bobby grabbed for him, but he shuddered off the table onto the concrete floor. He vomited again. There was blood everywhere. Ed opened the door, saying, "What the hell's happening?" And when he saw the blood, he turned away, his hand to his mouth. Bobby was grabbing for a stick to put in the boy's clenched jaws. But even as she did, she knew it was hopeless, and with a final spastic jerk, he relaxed and laid still. She bent to perform mouth to mouth. Manuel grabbed her shoulder fiercely, pulling her back. "No. The hoopia will cross over." "Manuel, for God's sake, no!" He stared at her fiercely. "No, you do not understand these things." Bobby looked at the body on the ground and realised that it didn't matter. Okay, assumed it doesn't want to work. Rude. There was no possibility of resurrecting him. Manuel called for the men, who came back into the room and took the body away. Ed appeared, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, muttering, "I'm sure you did all you could." And then she watched as the men took the body away, back to the helicopter, and lifted it thunderously up into the sky. "It is better," Manuel said. Bobby was thinking about the boy's hands. They had been covered with cuts and bruises and this characteristic pattern of defense wounds. She was quite sure he had not died in a construction accident. He had been attacked, and he had held up his hands against his attacker. "Where is this island they've come from?" she asked. "In the ocean, perhaps 100 20 miles offshore. Pretty far for a resort, she said. Manuel watched the helicopter. I hope they never come back. Well, she thought at least she had pictures. But when she turned back to the table, she saw that her camera was gone. The rain finally stopped later that night. Alone in the bedroom behind the clinic, Bobby thumbed through her tattered paperback Spanish dictionary. The boy had said raptor. And despite Manuel's protest, she suspected it was a Spanish word. Sure enough, she found it in her dictionary. It meant ravisher or abductor. That gave her pause. The sense of the word was suspiciously close to the meaning of hoopia. Of course, she did not believe in superstition, and no ghost had cut those hands. What had the boy been trying to tell her? From the next room she heard groans. One of the village women was in her first stage of labour. And Elena Morales, the local midwife, was attending her. Bobby went into the clinic room and gestured to Elena to step outside for a moment. Elena, see doctor? Do you know what is a raptor? Elena was a grey-haired and 60, a strong woman with a practical no-nonsense air. In the night beneath the stars, she frowned and said raptor. Yes. You know this word? See, Elena nodded. It means a person who comes in the night and takes away a child. A kidnapper. Yes. A hoopia. Her manner changed. Do not say this word, doctor. Why not? Do not speak of hoopia now. Elena said firmly, nodding her head towards the groans of the labouring woman. It is not wise to say this word now. It's worse. But does a raptor bite and cut his victims? Bite and cut? Elena said, puzzled. No, doctor. Nothing like this. A raptor is a man who takes a new baby. She seemed irritated by the conversation, impatient to end it. Elena started back towards the clinic. I will call to you when she is ready, doctor. I think 1 more hour, perhaps 2. Bobby looked at the stars and listened to the peaceful lapping of the surf at the shore. In the darkness she saw shadows of fishing boats anchored offshore. The whole scene was quiet, so normal. She felt foolish to be talking of vampires and kidnapped babies. Bobby went back to her room, remembering again that Manuel had insisted it was not a Spanish word. Out of curiosity, she looked it in her little English dictionary, and to her surprise, she found the word there too. Raptor, derivative el raptor, plunderer, bird of prey. First iteration. At the earliest drawings of the fractal curve, few clues to the underlying mathematical structure will be seen. Ian Malcolm. Dun dun dun, dun dun dun, it's all about to get so much worse. Oh, so much worse. Oh, so much worse. Probably, maybe. I'm gonna move, actually. I'm gonna move you to there. And see stuff. Whew. Almost paradise. Mike Bowman whistled cheerfully as he drove the Land Rover through the Cabo Blanco Biological Reserve on the west coast of Costa Rica. Seriously, Wi-Fi, you're really just going to play up today, huh? What do you mean no Wi-Fi connected? Give it back. You bitch. How dare you? That's my iPad. Oh, I'm so glad the Wi-Fi's closed. Chose death, legit. I might actually need this on this side. Unmute, thank you. That's better. Cool. I can actually see chat if I need it there, but also I've got it nicely in front of me. It's you that's my problem, Mr. Mike. I see you in the corner of my eyes. Anyway, where was I? On the west coast of Costa Rica. Yes, it was a beautiful morning in July. The road before him was spectacular, hugging the edge of a cliff overlooking the jungle and the blue Pacific. According to the guidebooks, Cabo Blanco was unspoiled wilderness, almost a paradise. Seeing it now made Bowman feel like as if they were on vacation was back on track. Bowman, a 36-year-old real estate developer from Dallas, had come to Costa Rica with his wife and daughter for a 2-week holiday. Some people might remember some bits from different movies. The trip had actually been his wife's idea. For weeks, Ellen had filled his ear about the wonderful national parks of Costa Rica and how good it would be for Tina to see them. Then, when they arrived, it turned out Ellen had an appointment to see a plastic surgeon in San Jose. That was the first Mike Bowman had heard about the excellent and inexpensive plastic surgery available in Costa Rica and all the luxurious private clinics in San Jose. Of course, they had a huge fight. Mike felt like she lied to him, and she had, and he had put his foot down about the plastic surgery business. Anyway, it was ridiculous. Ellen was only 30, and she was a beautiful woman. The names aren't good. The names have nothing, but if you remember Lost World enough, you remember how the start of the movie goes. Anyway, it was ridiculous. Ellen was only blah, 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 blah. Hell, she'd been homecoming queen at senior year at Rice. That was not even 10 years earlier. But Ellen tended to be insecure and worried, and it seemed as if recent years she had mostly worried about losing her looks. That and everything else. The Land Rover bounced into a pothole, splashing mud. Seated between him, Ellen said, "Mike, are you sure this is the right road? We haven't seen any other people for hours." "There was another car 15 minutes ago," he reminded her. "Remember the blue one?" "Going the other way? Darling, you wanted a deserted beach," he said. "And that's what you're going to get." Ellen shook her head doubtfully. "I hope you're right." "Yeah, Dad, I hope you're right," said Christina from the back seat. She was 8 years old. "Trust me, I'm right." He drove in silence a moment. "It's beautiful, isn't it? Look at the view. It's beautiful." "It's okay," Tina said. Ellen got out a compact and looked at herself in the mirror, pressing under her eyes. She sighed and put the compact away. The road began to descend, and Mike Bowman concentrated on driving. Suddenly, a small black shape flashed across the road, and Tina shrieked, "Look! Look!" Then it was gone, into the jungle. "What was it?" Ellen asked. "A monkey?" "Maybe a squirrel monkey," Bowman said. "Can I count it?" Tina said, taking out her pencil. She was keeping a list of all the animals she had seen on her trip, as a project for school. "I don't know," Mike said doubtfully. Tina consulted the pictures in the guidebook. "I don't think it was a squirrel monkey," she said. "I think it's just another howler." They'd seen several howler monkeys already on their trip. "Hey," she said more brightly, "according to this book, the beaches of Cabo Blanco are frequented by a variety of wildlife, including howler and white-faced monkeys, three-toed sloths, and cotimundus. Cotimundus, yeah, sure. You think we'll see a three-toed sloth, Dad?" "I bet we do. Really? Just look in the mirror." "Very funny, Dad." The road sloped downward through the jungle toward the ocean. My Bowman felt like a hero when they finally reached the beach. A 2-mile crescent of white sand, utterly deserted. He parked the Land Rover in the shade of the palm trees that fringed the beach and got out the box lunches. Ellen changed into her bathing suit, saying, "Honestly, I don't know how I'm going to get this weight off." "You look great, hun." Actually, he felt that she was too thin, but he had learned not to mention that. Tina was already running down the beach. "Don't forget you need your sunscreen," Ellen called. "Later," Tina shouted over her shoulder. "I'm going to see if there's a sloth." Ellen Bowman looked around the beach and the trees. "You think she's all right?" "Honey, there's nobody here for miles," Mike said. "What about snakes?" "Oh, for God's sake," Mike Bowman said. "There's no snakes on the beach." "Well, there might be. Honey," he said firmly. "Snakes are cold-blooded. They're reptiles. They can't control their body temperature. It's 90 degrees on the sand. If a snake came out, it'd be cooked. Believe me, there's no snakes on the beach." He watched his daughter scampering down the beach, a dark spot of the white sand. Let her go. Let her have a good time. He put his arm around his wife's waist. Tina ran until she was exhausted, and then she threw herself down onto the sand and gleefully rolled to the water's edge. The ocean was warm. There was hardly any surf at all. She sat for a while, catching her breath, and then she looked back towards her parents in the car to see how far she'd come. Her mother waved, beckoning to her return. Tina waved back cheerfully, pretending she didn't understand. Tina didn't want to put on sunscreen. and she didn't want to go back and hear her mother talk about losing weight. She wanted to stay right here and maybe see a sloth. Tina had seen a sloth 2 days earlier at the zoo in San Jose. It looked like a Muppets character, and it seemed harmless. In any days, it couldn't move fast, so she could easily outrun it. Now her mother was calling to her, and Tina decided to move out of the sun, back from the water to the shade of the palm trees. In this part of the beach, the palm trees overhung a gnarled tangle of mangrove roots, which blocked any attempt to penetrate inland. Tina sat in the sand and kicked the dried mangrove leaves. She noticed many bird tracks in the sand. Costa Rica was famous for its birds. The guidebook said there were 3 times as many birds in Costa Rica as in all of America and Canada. In the sand, some of the 3-toed birds were small and so faint that they could be hardly seen. Other tracks were large and cut deeper into the sand. Tina was looking idly at the tracks when she heard chirping, followed by a rustling in the mangrove thicket. Do sloths make a chirping sound? Tina didn't think so, but she wasn't sure. Chirping was probably some ocean bird. She waited quietly, not moving, hearing the rustling again. And finally she saw the source of the sounds. A few yards away, a lizard emerged from the mangrove roots and peered at her. Tina held her breath. New animal for her list. The lizard stood up on its hind legs, balancing on its thick tail, and stared at her. Standing like that, it was almost a foot tall. Dark green with brown stripes along its back. Its tiny front legs ended with little lizard fingers that wriggled in the air. The lizard cocked its head as it looked at her. Tina thought it was cute. Some sort of like a big salamander. She raised a hand and wiggled her fingers back. The lizard wasn't frightened. It came towards her, walking upright on its hind legs. It was hardly bigger than a chicken. And, like a chicken, it bobbed its head as it walked. Tina thought it would make a wonderful pet. She noticed that the lizard left 3-toed tracks that looked exactly like bird tracks. The lizard came closer to Tina. She kept her body still, not wanting to frighten the little animal. Metoxotree is the same as Tina, 100%. She was amazed it would come so close, but she remembered that this was a national park. All the animals in the park would know they're protected. The lizard was probably tame. Maybe even expected her to give it some food. Fortunately, she didn't have any. Slowly, Tina extended a hand, palm open, to show that she didn't have any food. The lizard paused, cocked its head and chirped. Sorry, Tina said. I just don't have anything. And then, without warning, the lizard jumped onto her outstretched hand. Tina could feel its little toes pinching the skin of her palm, and she felt the surprising weight of the animal's body pressing her arm down, and the lizard scrambled up her arm toward her face. I just wish I could see her, Ellen Bowman said, squinting in the sunlight. That's all. Just see her. I'm sure she's fine, Mike said, picking through the box lunch packed by the hotel. There was an unappetizing grilled chicken and some kind of meat-filled pastry. Not that Ellen would eat any kind of it. You don't think she'd leave the beach? Ellen said. No, hun, I don't. I feel so isolated here, Ellen said. I thought that's what you wanted, Mike Bowman said. I did. Well, then what's the problem? I just wish I could see her is all. Then from down the beach, carried by the wind, they heard their daughter's voice. She was screaming. Puntarenus. Yeah, that seems like a good work. That definitely just seems like a normal word. I think she is quite comfortable now, Dr. Cruz said, lowering the plastic flap on the oxygen tent around Tina as she slept. Mike Bowman sat beside the bed close to his daughter. Mike thought Dr. Cruz was probably pretty capable. He spoke excellent English, and the result of training at medical centres in London and Baltimore. Dr. Cruz radiated competence, and the Clinica Santa Maria, the modern hospital in Punta Arenas, whatever the fuck that is, was spotless and efficient. But even so, Mike Bowman felt nervous. There was no getting around the fact that his only daughter was desperately ill, and they were far from home. When Mike had first reached Tina, she was screaming hysterically. Her whole left arm was bloody, covered in profusion of small bites, each the size of a thumbprint, and there were flecks of sticky foam on her arm like a foamy saliva. He carried her back down the beach. Almost immediately her arm began to redden and swell. Mike was not soon to forget the frantic drive back to civilization. The four-wheel drive Land Rover slipping and sliding up the muddy track into the hills while his daughter screamed in fear and pain, and her arm grew more bloated and red. Long before they reached the park boundaries, the swelling had spread to her neck, and then Tina had begun trouble breathing. "She'll be all right now?" Ellen said, staring through the plastic oxygen tent. "I believe so," Dr. Crew said. "I'd have given her another dose of steroids, and her breathing is much easier, and you can see the edema in her arm is greatly reduced." My Bowman said. "About those bites." "We have no identification yet," the doctor said. "I myself haven't seen bites like that before, but you'll notice they are disappearing. It's already quite difficult to make them out. Fortunately, I've taken photographs for reference, and I've washed her arm to collect samples of the sticky saliva. One for analysis here, and a second sent to the labs in San Jose. And the third will be frozen in case it is needed. Do you have the pictures she made?" "Yes," my woman said. He handed the doctor the sketch Tina had drawn in response to questions from Min officials. "This is the animal that bit her?" Dr. Cruz said, looking at the picture. "Yes," my woman said. "She said it was a green lizard the size of a chicken or a crow." "I don't know such of a lizard," the doctor said. "She has drawn it standing on its hind legs." "That's right," my Bowman said. "She said it walked on its hind legs." Dr. Cruz frowned. He stared at the picture a while longer. "I'm not an expert. I've asked for Dr. Gutierrez to visit here. He's a senior researcher at the Reserve Biologica de Caria, which is across the bay. Perhaps he can identify the animal." "Isn't there someone from Cabo Blanco? That's where she was bitten." "Unfortunately not. Cabo Blanco has no permanent staff, and no researcher has worked there for some time. You're probably the first person to walk on that beach in several months. But I'm sure you will find that Dr. Gutierrez to be knowledgeable." Dr. Gutierrez turned out to be a bearded man wearing khaki shorts and a shirt, to the surprise that he was American. He was introduced to the Bowmans, saying in a soft southern accent, "Mr. and Mrs. Bowman, how you doing? Nice to meet you." And then explaining that he was field biologist from Yale who had worked in Costa Rica for the last 5 years. Marty examined Tina thoroughly, lifting her arm gently, peering closely at each of the bites with a penlight, and measuring them with a small pocket ruler. After a while, Gutierrez stepped away, nodding to himself as he had understood something. He then inspected the Polaroids and asked several questions about the saliva, which Cruz told him was still being tested in a lab. Finally, he turned to Mike Bowman and his wife, waiting tensely. "I think Tina's going to be fine. I just want to be clear about a few details," he said, making notes in precise hand. "Your daughter said she was bitten by a green lizard, approximately 1 foot high, which walked upright onto the beach from the mangrove swamp?" "That's right, yes." "And the lizard made some kind of vocalization?" Tina said it chirped. Or squeaked. Like a mouse would, you'd say. "Yes." "Well then," Dr. Gutierrez said, "I know this lizard." He explained that of the 6,000 species of lizards in the world, no more than a dozen species walked upright. Of those species, only 4 were found in Latin America, and judging by the coloration, lizard can only be one of the 4. I'm sure that the lizard was a Basilisk amoritus. Sure, yeah, basilisk lizard. Found here in Costa Rica and also in Honduras. Standing on its hind legs, they're sometimes as tall as a foot. Are they poisonous? No, Mrs. Bowman, not at all. Gutierrez explained. The swelling on Tina's arm was an allergic reaction. According to the literature, 14% of people are strongly allergic to reptiles, and your daughter seems to be one of them. She was screaming. She said it was so painful. Probably it was. Reptile saliva contains serotonin. Serotonin. If it fucking contains serotonin, I want some. Serotonin. Very different. Which causes tremendous pain. He turned to Cruz. Her blood pressure came down with the antihistamines? Yes, Cruz said, promptly. Serotonin. Swear to God, I'm reading this as serotonin. I'm thinking, just give me some. Still, Ellen Bowman remained uneasy. But why would a lizard bite her in the first place? Make Phoenix bite you. Legit. But if I'm not allergic, what's the fucking point? Fucking Habibi bit me like 3 times and nothing happened. Lizard bites are very common, Gutierrez said. Animal handlers and zoos get bitten all the time. And just the other day I heard that a lizard had bitten an infant in her crib in Amalea, about 60 miles from where you were. So bites do occur. I'm not sure why your daughter had so many. What was she doing at the time? Nothing. She said she was sitting pretty still because she didn't want to frighten it away. Sitting pretty still. Well, I don't think we can say exactly what happened. Wild animals are unpredictable. And what about the foamy saliva on her arm? Ellen said. I keep thinking about rabies. No, Dr. Gutierrez said. A reptile can't carry rabies, Mrs. Bowman. Your daughter has suffered an allergic reaction to the bite of a basilisk lizard. Nothing more serious. Tina had, Meg Bowman had then shown Gutierrez the picture that Tina had drawn. Gutierrez nodded. I would accept this as a picture of a basilisk lizard. A few details are wrong, of course. The neck is much too long, and she had drawn the hind legs with only 3 toes instead of 5. The tail is too thick and raised too high, but otherwise it's perfectly serviceable lizard of the kind we're talking about. But Tina specifically said it had a long neck. She said that there were 3 toes on the feet. Tina's pretty observant, Mike Bowman said. I'm sure she is, Gutierrez said, smiling. But I still think your daughter was bitten by a common basilisk fucking bullshit and had a severe reaction. Normal time course with medication is 12 hours. She should be fine in the morning. In the modern laboratory in the basement of Clinica Santa Maria, word was received that Dr. Gutierrez had identified the animal that had bitten the American child as a harmless basilisk lizard. Immediately, the analysis of the saliva was halted, even though a preliminary fractionation showed several extremely high molecular weight proteins of unknown biological activity. But the night technician was busy, and he placed the saliva samples on the holding shelf of the refrigerator. The next morning, the day clerk checked into the holding shelf against the names of discharged patients. Seeing that Bowman, Christina, was scheduled for discharge this morning, the crew threw out the saliva samples. At the last moment, he noticed that one of the samples had a red tag, which meant that it would be forwarded to the university in San Jose. You're trying to do science words, but I fucking hate reading long words, especially if I don't know them. He retrieved the test tube from the wastebasket and sent it on its way. Go on, say thank you to Dr. Cruz, Ellen Bowman said, and pushed Tina forward. Thank you, Dr. Cruz, Tina said. I feel much better now. She reached up and shook the doctor's hand and said, You have a different shirt. For a moment, Dr. Cruz looked perplexed, and then he smiled. That's right, Tina. When I work all night at a hospital in the morning, I change my shirt. But not your tie. No, just my shirt. Ellen Bowman said, Mike told you she's observant. She certainly is. Dr. Cruz smiled and shook the little girl's hand gravely. Enjoy the rest of your holiday in Costa Rica, Tina. I will. The Bowman family started to leave when Dr. Cruz said, Oh, Tina, do you remember the lizard that bit you? Uh-huh. You remember its feet? Uh-huh. Did it have any toes? Yes. How many toes did it have? 3. How do you know this? Because I looked, she said. Anyway, all the birds on the beach made marks in the sand with 3 toes, like this. She held up her hand, middle finger spread wide. And the lizard made those kind of marks in the sand, too. The lizard made marks like a bird. Uh-huh. He walked like a bird, too. He jerked his head like this, up and down. She took a few steps, bobbing her head. After the Bowmans had departed, Dr. Cruz decided to report the conversation to Gutierrez, the biological station. I must admit, the girl's story is puzzling, Gutierrez said. I have been doing some checking myself. I'm no longer certain she was bitten by a basilisk. Not certain at all. Then what could it be? Well, let's not speculate prematurely. By the way, have you heard any of the other lizard bites at the hospital? No? Why? Let me know, my friend, if you do. The beach. Marty Gutierrez sat on the beach and watched the afternoon sun fall lower into the sky until it sparkled harshly on the water of the bay. And its rays reached beneath the palm trees to where he sat among the mangroves on the beach of Cabo Blanco. At best, he could determine he was sitting near the spot where the American girl had been 2 days before. Although it was true enough, as he had told the Bowmans, that lizard bites were very common. Gutierrez had never heard of a basilisk lizard running around and biting anyone, and he'd certainly never heard of anyone being hospitalized for a lizard bite. Then, to the bite radius on Tina's arm appeared slightly too large for a basilisk. When he got back to the Carrara station, he had checked the small research library there, but found no reference to basilisk lizard bites. Next, he checked the International Biosciences Services, a computer database in America, but he had found no references to basilisk bites or hospitalization for lizard bites. He then called the medical officer in Amalaya, who confirmed that a 9-day infant sleeping in its crib had been bitten on the foot by an animal the grandmother, the only person to actually see it, claimed was a lizard. Subsequently, the foot had become swollen and the infant had nearly died. The grandmother described the lizard as green with brown stripes. It had bitten the child several times before the woman frightened it away. Strange, Gutierrez had said. Not like all the others, the medical officer replied, adding that he had heard of other biting incidents. A child in Vasquez, the next village up the coast, had bitten by a wife sleeping, another in Puerto Sotero. All the incidents had occurred in the last 2 months. All had involved sleeping children and infants. Such a new and distinctive pattern led Gutierrez to suspect the presence of a previously unknown species of lizard. This was practically likely to happen in Costa Rica. Only 75 miles wide at its narrowest point, the country was smaller than the state of Maine. Yet, within its limited space, Costa Rica had a remarkable diversity of biological habitats. Seacoast on both the Atlantic and the Pacific, 4 separate mountain ranges including 12,000-foot peaks and active volcanoes. Rainforest, cloud forest, temperature zone, swampy marsh and arid deserts. Such ecological diversity sustained an astonishing diversity of plant and animal life. Costa Rica had 3 times as many species of birds as all of North America, more than 1,000 species of orchids, more than 5,000 species of insects. So the dinos yearn for childhood flesh. New species were discovered all the time at a pace that had increased in recent years. For a sad reason. Costa Rica was becoming deforested. And as the jungle species lost their habitats, they moved to other areas and sometimes changed behavior as well. So a new species was perfectly possible. But along with the excitement of the new species was the worrisome possibility of new diseases. Lizards carried viral diseases, including several that can be transmitted to man. The most serious was central saurian encephalitis, or CSE, which was a cause of form of sleeping sickness in human beings and horses. Gutierrez felt like it was important to find this new lizard, if only to test it for disease. Sitting on the beach, I have a better way to hold this, I think. Sitting on the beach, he watched the sun drop lower and sighed. Perhaps Tina Bowman had seen a new animal, perhaps not. Certainly Gutierrez had not. Earlier that morning, he had taken the air pistol, loaded the clip with ligamine darts, and set out for the beach with high hopes, but the day was wasted. Soon he would have to begin the drive back up the hill from the beach. He did not want to drive that road in darkness. Gutierrez got to his feet and started back up the beach. Farther along, he saw the dark shape of a howler monkey ambling along the edge of the mangrove swamp. Gutierrez moved away, stepping out towards the water. If there was one howler, there would probably be others in the trees overhead, and howlers tended to urinate on intruders. But this particular howler monkey seemed to be alone, and walking slowly, and pausing frequently to sit on its haunches. The monkey had something in its mouth. As Gutierrez came closer, he saw it was eating a lizard. The tail and the hind legs drooped from the monkey's jaws. Even from a distance, Gutierrez could see the brown stripes against the green. Gutierrez dropped to the ground and aimed the pistol. The howler monkey, accustomed to the living in a protected reserve, stared curiously. He did not run, even when the first dart whined harmlessly past him. When the second dart struck him deep in the thigh, the howler shrieked in anger and surprise, dropping the remains of its meal as it fled into the jungle. Gutierrez got to his feet and walked forward. He wasn't worried about the monkey. The tranquilizer dose was too small to give it anything but a few minutes of dizziness. Already he was thinking of what to do with his new find. Gutierrez himself would write the preliminary report, but the remains would have been sent back to the United States for final positive identification, of course. To whom should he send it? The acknowledged expert was Edward H. Simpson, professor of zoology at Columbia University in New York. An elegant older man with swept-back white hair, Simpson was probably the world's leading authority on licks taxidermy. Probably Marty thought he would send his lizard to Dr. Simpson. New York. My head is still going, which is so annoying. I really don't understand. Like, I got a headache because of teeth pain. Teeth pain's gone. Get rid of the headache. I probably should have made actual tea. Probably would have, like, fixed a few of my issues. Oh well. We move. At least it's a chill stream. Whoa. New York. Dr. Richard Stone, head of Tropical Diseases Laboratory of Columbia University Medical Center, often remarked that the name conjured up a grander place than it actually was. Would have been smart. It would have, but I just really didn't want one. Like, you know when you're like, it's already so warm in here. Like, I've got the window open. I'm already so warm. I didn't want tea. Like, I wouldn't mind if I was, like, absolutely freezing. But I was like, no. So, you know, we get stuff in a mug. Yeah, it's such a good mug. In the early 20th century, when the laboratory occupied the entire fourth floor of the biomedical research building, crews of technicians worked to eliminate the scourges of yellow fever, malaria, and cholera. But medical successes and research laboratories in Nairobi and Sao Paulo had left the TDL much less important place than it once was. Now a fraction of its former size, it employed only 2 full-time technicians. They were primarily concerned with the diagnosis illnesses of New Yorkers who had travelled abroad. The lab's comfortable routine was unprepared for what it received that morning. "Ooh, very nice," the technician in Tropical Diseases Laboratory said, as she read the customs label. "Partially masticated fragment of unidentified Costa Rica lizard," she said. She wrinkled her nose. "This one's all yours, Dr. Stone." Richard Stone crossed the lab to inspect the new arrival. "Is this the material from Ed Simpson's lab?" "Yes," she said, "but I don't know why they'd send a lizard to us." His secretary called. Simpson's on a field trip in Borneo for the summer, and because there's a question of question of disease with the lizard, she asked our lab to take a look. Let's see what we've got. The white plastic cylinder was the size of a half-gallon milk container. It had locking metal latches and a screw top. It was labelled International Biological Specimen Container and plastered with stickers and warning in 4 languages. The warnings were intended to keep the cylinder from being opened by suspicious custom officials. Apparently the warnings had worked. As Richard Stone swung the big light over, he could see the seals were intact. Stone turned on the air handlers and pulled on the plastic gloves and face mask. After all, the lab had recently identified specimens contaminated with Venezuelan equine fever, Japanese bee encephalitis, kind of sore nerve forest virus, Langat virus, and Mayro. Yeah, sure, they all seem like legit things. Totally. Blah, 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 blah. Then he unscrewed the top. There was a hiss of escaping gas, and white smoke boiled out. The cylinder turned frosty cold. Inside, he found a plastic Ziploc sandwich bag containing something green. Stone spread a surgical drape on the table and shook out the contents. A piece of frozen flesh struck the table with a dull thud. Huh, the technician said. Looks eaten. Yes, it does. What do they want with us? The technician consulted the enclosed documents. Lizard is biting local children. They have a question about identification of species and a concern about diseases transmitted from the bite. She produced a child's picture of a lizard signed Tina at the top. One of the kids drew a picture of a lizard. Stone glanced at the picture. Obviously, we can't verify the species. We can check diseases easily enough if we can get any blood fragments out of this. What are they calling this animal? Basiliscus amortus with 3-toe genetic anomaly, she said, reading. Okay, let's get started. While you're waiting for it to thaw, do an x-ray and take Polaroids for the record. Once we have blood, start running antibody sets until we get some matches. Let me know if there's a problem. Before lunchtime, the lab had its answer. The lizard blood showed no significant reactivity to any viral or bacterial antigen. They had run toxicity profiles as well, and they had found only one positive match. The blood was mildly reactive to the venom of the Indian king cobra. But such cross-reactivity was common among reptile species, and Dr. Stone did not think it was noteworthy to include in the facts his technician sent to Dr. Martin Gutierrez the same evening. There was never any question about identifying the lizard. That would await the return of Dr. Simpson. He was not due back for several weeks, and his secretary asked if TDL would please store the lizard fragment in the meantime. Dr. Stone put it back in the Ziploc bag and stuck it in the freezer. Martin Gutierrez read the facts from the Columbia Medical Center / Tropical Disease Laboratory. It was brief. Subject: lizard. Materials: posterior segment, partially eaten animal. Procedures performed: X-ray, microscopic, immunological RTX for viral, parasitic, bacterial diseases. Findings: no histologic or immunologic evidence for communicable disease in man in this sample. Regards, Richard A. Stone, MD, Director. Gutierrez made 2 assumptions based on the memo. First, that his identification of the lizard as a basilisk had been confirmed by scientists at Columbia University. And second, that the absence of communicable disease meant the recent episodes of sporadic lizard bites imply no serious health hazards in Costa Rica. On the contrary, he felt his original views were correct, that the lizard had been driven from the forest into a new habitat and was coming into contact with village people. Gutierrez was certain in a few more weeks the lizard would settle down and the biting episodes would stop. The tropical rain fell in great drenching sheets, hammering the congregated roof of the clinic. Bahia. It was nearly midnight. Power had been lost in the storm, and the midwife, Elena Morales, was working by flashlight when she heard a squeaking, chirping sound. Thinking it was a rat, she quickly put a compress on the forehead of the mother and went into the next room to check on the newborn baby. As a hand touched the doorknob, she heard the chirping again, and she relaxed. Evidently, it was just a bird flying into the window to get out of the rain. Costa Rican said that when a bird came to visit a newborn child, it brought good luck. Elena opened the door. The infant lay in a wicker bassinet, swaddled in the light blanket. only its face exposed. Around the rim of the bassinet, 3 dark green lizards crouched like gargoyles. When they saw Elena, they cocked their heads and stared curiously at her, but did not flee. In the light of her flashlight, Elena saw the blood dripping from their snouts. Softly chirping, one lizard bent down and with a quick shake of its head, tore a ragged chunk of flesh from the baby. Elena rushed forward, screaming, and the lizards fled into the darkness. But long before she reached the bassinet, she could see what happened to the infant's face, and she knew the child must be dead. The lizards scattered into the rainy night, chirping and squealing, leaving behind only bloody 3-toed tracks, like birds. That, I wish I had the piece that someone had drawn for that scene, because it's fucking creepy as shit. One of my favourites, but it's the one controversial scene that half the people would love to see in a movie and half the people wouldn't love to see in the movie. Because it is quite fucking dark for, I wonder if, I didn't even keep this one in there. So I wonder if, I have it. So I saved loads of the others, but I didn't save the, why do they, they're easy targets. You gotta remember. What's that kid gonna do? Run? It's very dark. This is how much we've done. Compies on bassinets. That is one of actually, I think, the darkest scenes, because you're not expecting it. So, like, this was one of... I finally have it. One of the drawings. I haven't obviously set it up for this because I normally save the pictures. 7%. Yeah, we're literally, like I said, we're worried about time. I've still got... Where's second iteration? So, we've still got, as of today, we've still got that much. This is what I mean. It's beautiful. This is a good fucking chunk. Add existing? No, not add existing. Just create a new quickly. Yeah, nice. Sure. Yes, though it's annoyingly enough that it doesn't do it as the... It wants me to do accept all for it, which is so annoying. Why? No fun. Let's not do it that way then. I want the proper image. What do I normally... I want like a whole different setup, so it's you. That's what I want. That's the one. There we go. Get a good old look at that one. Oh god. There we go. That's the main draws that a lot of people obviously picture for that one scene. Which I fucking adore it. There's other versions. There is other versions. There's one as well, like from a different angle, but that's the main one people go for. Fucking it's brilliant because it is just that is like the dark reality of having dinosaurs on your land. So they're gonna come and eat your shit. They're fucking dinosaurs. That's how it works. dingers as well. I don't even think we get to like the park anytime soon. Ooh, on to the next bit. The shape of the data. Later, when she was calmer, Elena Morales decided not to report the lizard attack. Despite the horror she had seen, she began to worry that she might be criticised for leaving the baby unguarded. So she told the mother that her baby had been asphyxiated, and she reported the death on the form she sent to San Jose as SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. This was a syndrome of unexplained death among very young children. It was unremarkable, and her report went unchallenged. The university lab in San Jose that analysed the saliva sample from Tina Bowman's arm made several remarkable discoveries. There was, as expected, a great deal of serotonin, but among the salivary proteins was a real monster. Molecule mass of 1980000, one of the largest proteins known. Biological activity was still under study, and it seemed to be a neurotoxic poison related to cobra venom, although more primitive in structure. The lab also detected trace quantities of the gamma amino methionine hydrolase, fun, because the enzyme was a marker for genetic engineering. I don't know where that's from, and not found in wild animals. Technicians assumed it was lab contaminant and did not report it when they called Dr. Cruz, the referring physician. The lizard fragment rested in the freezer at Columbia University, awaiting the return of Dr. Simpson, who was not expected for at least a month. And so things might have not remained had not a technician named Alice Levin walked in to the Tropical Disease Laboratory, seen Bowman's picture and said, "Oh, whose kid drew the dinosaur?" "What?" Richard Stone said, turning to her slowly. The dinosaur. Isn't that what it is? My kid draws these all the time. This is the lizard from Costa Rica. Some girl drew the picture of it. "No," Alice said, shaking her head. "Look at it. It's very clear. Big head, long neck, standards on tiny legs, thick tail. It's a dinosaur." "It can't be. It's only a foot tall." "So? There were little dinosaurs back then," Alice said. "Believe me, I know. I have 2 boys. I'm an expert. The smallest dinosaur was under a foot. Teenosaurus or something. I don't know. The names are impossible." "You'll never learn the names if you're over the age of 10. You don't understand," Richard Stone said. "This is a picture of a contemporary animal. They sent us a fragment of the animal. It's in the freezer now." Stone went and got it and shook it out of its baggie. Alice Levin looked at the frozen piece of tail and leg and shrugged. She didn't touch it. "I don't know," she said, "but that looks like a dinosaur to me." Stone shook his head. "Impossible." "Why?" "It could be left over, or a remnant, or whatever they call them." Stone continued to shake his head. Alice was uninformed. She was just a technician who worked in the bacteriology lab down the hall. But she had an active imagination. Stone remembered that time when she thought she was being followed by one of the surgical orderlies. "You know," Alice said, "if this is a dinosaur, Richard, it could be a big deal." "It's not a dinosaur." "Has anybody checked it?" "No." "Well, take it to the Museum of Natural History or something. You really should." "I'd be embarrassed." "You want me to do it for you then?" "No," Richard Stone said. I don't. "You're not going to do anything?" "Nothing at all." He put the baggie back in the freezer and slammed the door. "It's not a dinosaur, it's a lizard, and whatever it is, it can wait until Dr. Simpson gets back from Borneo to identify it. That's final, Alice. The lizard's not going anywhere." Second iteration. With subsequent drawings of the fractal curve, sudden changes may appear. Ian Malcolm. The shore of the inland sea. Alan Grant crouched down, his nose inches from the ground. The temperature was over 100 degrees. His knees ached despite the rug layers pads he wore. His lungs burned from the harsh alkaline dust. Sweat dripped off his forehead onto the ground, but Grant was oblivious to this discomfort. His entire attention was focused on the 6-inch square of earth in front of him. Working patiently with a dental pick and an artist's camel brush, he exposed a tiny L-shaped fragment of a jawbone. It was only an inch long, no thicker than his little finger. The teeth were a row of small points and had the characteristics medial angling. Jesus. Bits of bone flaked away as he dug. Grant paused for a moment to paint the bone with a rubber cement before continuing to expose it. There was no question that this was the jawbone from an infant carnivorous dinosaur. Its owner had died 79 million years ago at the age of about 2 months. With any luck, Grant might find the rest of the skeleton as well. If so, it would be the first complete skeleton of a baby carnivore. Hey, Alan! Alan Grant looked up, blinking in the sunlight. He pulled down his sunglasses and wiped his forehead with the back of his arm. He was crouched on an eroded hillside in the Badlands, outside Snakewater, Montana. Beneath the great blue bowl of sky, blunted hills, exposed outcroppings of crumbling limestone stretched for miles in every direction. There was not a tree or a bush, nothing but barren rock, hot sun, and winding wind. Visitors from the Badlands Visitors found the Badlands depressingly bleak, but when Grant looked at this landscape, he saw something else entirely. This barren land of what remained of another, very different world, which had vanished 80 million years ago. In this mind's eye, Grant saw himself back in the warm, swampy bayou that formed the shoreline of the Great Inland Sea. This inland sea was 1,000 miles wide, extending all the way from the newly upthrust Rocky Mountains to the sharp, craggy peaks of the Appalachians. All of the American West was underwater. At the time, there were thin clouds in the sky overhead, darkened by the smoke of nearby volcanoes. The atmosphere was denser, richer in carbon dioxide. Plants grew rapidly along the shoreline. There was no fish in these waters. But there were clams and snails. Pterosaurs swooped down to scoop algae from the surface. A few carnivores, fuck this because that's what I'm reading it as. A few carnivores prowled the swampy shoreline of the lake, moving along the palm trees. And offshore was a small island, about 2 acres in size, ringed with dense vegetation. This island formed a protected sanctuary with herds of herbivores. Fuck this. Herbivores laid their eggs in communal nests and raised their squeaking young. Over the million years that followed, the pale green alkaline lake grew shallower and finally vanished. The exposed land buckled and cracked under the heat, and the offshore island with the dinosaur eggs became the eroded hillside in northern Montana, which Alan Grant was now excavating. Hey, Alan! He stood, a barrel-chested, bearded man of 40. He had heard the chugging of a portable generator and the distant clatter of the jackhammer cutting into dense rock on the next hill. He saw the kids working around the jackhammer, moving away the big pieces of rock after checking them for fossils. At the foot of the hill, he saw the 6 keepers of his camp, the flapping mess tent, and the trailer he had served as their field laboratory. He saw Ellie waving to him from the shadow of the field laboratory. "Visitor," she called, and pointed to the east. Grant saw a cloud of dust and the blue Ford sedan bouncing over the rutted road towards them. He glanced at his watch. Right on time. On the other hill, the kids looked up with interest. They didn't get many visitors in Snakewater, and there had been a lot of speculation about what a lawyer from the Environmental Protection Agency would want to see Alan Grant about. But Grant knew that paleontology, the study of extinct life, had in recent years taken an unexpected relevance to the modern world. The modern world was changing fast, and urgent questions about weather, deforestation, global warming, or the ozone layer seemed answerable, at least in part with the information from the past, information that paleontologists could provide. He had been called as an expert to witness twice in the past few years. Grant stared down the hill to meet the car. The visitor coughed in the white dust as he slammed the door. "Bob Morris, EPA," he said, extending his hand. "I'm with the San Francisco office." Grant introduced himself and said, "You look hot. Want a beer?" Jesus, yeah. Morris was in his late 20s, wearing a tie and pants from a business suit. He carried a briefcase. His wingtip shoes crunched on the rocks as they walked towards the trailer. "When I first came over the hill, I thought it was an Indian reservation," Morris said, pointing to the teepees. No, Grant said, just the best way to live out here. Grant explained that in 1978, the first year of the excavations, they had come out in the North Slope cathedral tents, the most advanced available, but the tents always blew away in the wind. They tried other kinds of tents with the same results. Finally, they started putting up teepees, which were larger inside, more comfortable, and more stable in the wind. These are Blackfoot teepees, built around 4 poles, Grant said. Teepees, six, something like that. I don't know. Teepees are built around 3, but they used to be Blackfoot territory, so we thought, Morris said. Very fitting. He squinted at the long, desolate landscape and shook his head. How long have you been out here? About 60 cases, Grant said. When Morris looked surprised, he explained, we measure time in beer. We started in June with 100 cases. We've gone for about 60 so far. 63 to be exact, Ellie Sattler said as they reached the trailer. Grant was amused to see Morris gaping at her. Ellie was wearing cut-off jeans and a work shirt tied at her midriff. She was 24 and darkly tanned. Her blonde hair was pulled back. Ellie keeps us going, Grant said, introducing her. She's very good at what she does. What does she do? Morris asked. Paleobotany, Ellie said. And I also do the standard field preps. She opened the door and they went inside. The air conditioning in the trailer only brought the temperature down to 85 degrees. But it seemed cool after the midday heat. The trailer had a series of long wooden tables with tiny bone specimens neatly laid out, tagged and labelled. Further along were ceramic dishes and crooks. There was a strong odour of vinegar. Morris glanced at the bones. I thought dinosaurs were big. They were, Ellie said, but everything you see here comes from babies. Snake water is important primarily because of the number of the dinosaurs' nesting sites here. Until we started the work, there were hardly any infant dinosaurs known. Only one nest had ever been found in the Gobi Desert. We've discovered a dozen different hadrosaur nests, complete with eggs and bones of infants. While Grant went to the refrigerator, she showed Morris the acetic acid baths, which were used to dissolve away the limestone from delicate bones. They look like chicken bones, Morris said, peering into the ceramic dishes. Yes, she said, they're very bird-like. And what are those? Morris said, pointing through the trailer window to piles of large bones outside wrapped in heavy plastics. Rejects, Ellie said. Bones too fragmenty when we took them out of the ground. In the old days we just discard them, but nowadays we send them for genetic testing. Genetic testing? Here you go, Grant said, thrusting a beer into his hand. He gave another to Ellie. She chugged hers, throwing her long neck back. Morris stared. We're pretty informal here. Want to step into my office? Sure, Morris said. Grant led him to the end of the trailer, where there was a torn couch, a sagging chair, and a battered end table. Grant dropped onto the couch, which creaked and exhaled a cloud chalky dust. He leaned back, thumped his boots to the end of the table, and gestured for Morris to sit in the chair. Make yourself comfortable. Grant was a professor of paleontology at the University of Denver, and one of the foremost researchers in his field, but he had never been comfortable with social niceties. He saw himself as an outdoor man, and he knew that all the important work in paleontology was done outdoors, with your hands. Grant had little patience for the academics, for the museum creators, for what he'd call the teacup dinosaur hunters. And he had took some pains to distance himself in dress and behaviour from the teacup dinosaur hunters, even delivering his lectures in jeans and sneakers. Grant watched as Morris primely brushed off the seat of his chair before he sat down. Morris opened his briefcase, rummaging through papers, and glanced to look back at Ellie, who was lifting bones with tweezers from the acid bath at the other end of the trailer, paying no attention to them. You're probably wondering why I'm here. Grant nodded. It's a long way to come, Mr. Morris. Well, Morris said, to get right to the point, the EPA is concerned about the activities of the Hammond Foundation. You've received some funding from them. $30,000 a year for the last 5 years. What do you know about this foundation? Grant shrugged. The Hammond Foundation is a respected source of academic grants. They fund research all over the world, including several dinosaur researchers. I know this about Bob Kerry out of the Tyrol in Alberta and John Weller in Alaska, probably more. Do you know why the Hammond Foundation supports so much dinosaur research? Morris asked. Of course. It's because old John Hammond is a dinosaur nut. You've met Hammond? Once or twice. He comes here for a brief visit. He's quite elderly, you know, and eccentric, the way rich people sometimes are. He's always very enthusiastic. Why? Well, Morris said, the Hammond Foundation is actually a rather mysterious organisation. He pulled out a world map marked with red dots and passed it to Graham. These are the digs the Foundation financed last year. Notice anything odd about them? Montana, Alaska, Canada, Sweden. There are sites in the north. There's nothing below the 45th parallel. Morris pulled out more maps. It's the same, year after year. Dinosaur projects to the south in Utah, Colorado, or Mexico never get funded. The Hammond Foundation only supports cold weather digs. We'd like to know why. Grant shuffled through the maps quickly. If it were true that the Foundation only supported cold weather digs, then it was strange behaviour. Because some of the best researchers were working in hot climates, and there are other puzzles, Morris said. For example, what is the relationship of a dinosaur to amber? Amber? Yes, it's the hard resin thing. I know what it is, Grant said. But why are you asking? Because, Morris said, over the last 5 years, Hammond has purchased enormous quantities of amber in America, Europe, and Asia, including many pieces of museum-quality jewellery. The Foundation has spent $17 million on amber. They now possess the largest privately held stock of material in the world. I don't get it, Grant said. Neither does anybody else, Morris said. As far as we can tell, it doesn't make any sense at all. Amber is easily synthesized. It's no commercial or defense value. There's no reason to stockpile it. But Hammond has done just that over the years. I wonder why. Amber, Grant said, shaking his head. And what about his island in Costa Rica? 10 years ago, the Hammond Foundation leased an island from the government of Costa Rica, supposedly to set up a biological preserve. I don't know anything about that, Grant said, frowning. I haven't been able to find out much, Morris said. The island is 100 miles off the west coast. It's very rugged, and it's in an area of the ocean where the combinations of the wind and current make it almost perpetually covered in fog. They used to call it the Cloud Island, Isle Nublar. Apparently the Costa Ricans were amazed that anybody would want it. The reason I mention it, he said, is according to the records, you were paid as a consultant fee in the connection with the island. I was? Grant said. Morris passed a sheet of paper to Grant. It was the Xerox of a check issued in March 1984 from InGen Inc. Blah blah blah, the whole location. Made out to Alan Grant in the amount of $12,000. At the lower corner, the check was marked Consultant Services, Costa Rica, Juvenile Hyperspace. Oh, sure, I remember that. It was weird as hell, but I remember it. And it didn't have anything to do with an island. Alan Grant had found the first clutch of dinosaur eggs in Montana in 1979, and many more in the next 2 years, but hadn't gotten around to publishing his findings till 1983. His paper, with its report of a herd of 10,000 duck-billed dinosaurs living along the shore of a vast inland sea, building communal nests of the eggs in the mud, raising their infants, dinosaurs in the herd, made Grant a celebrity overnight. The notion of maternal instincts in giant dinosaurs and the drawings of cute babies poking their snouts out of the eggs had the appeal around the world. Grant was besieged with requests for interviews, lectures, books. Characteristically, he turned them all down, wanting only to continue his excavations. But it was during those frantic days in the mid-1980s that he was approached by the InGen Corporation with a request for consulting services. Have you heard of InGen before? Morris asked. No. How did they contact you? Telephone call. It was a man named Gennaro or Giannino, something like that. Like Sarah was looking for. Oh, what, like, yeah, the characteristics. Yeah. Donald Gennaro, he said. He's the legal consul for InGen. Anyway, he wanted to know about the eating habits of dinosaurs, and he offered me a fee to draw up a paper for him. Grant drank his beer, set the can on the floor. Gennaro was particularly interested in young dinosaurs, infants and juveniles. What they ate? I guess he thought I would know about that. Did you? Not really, no. I told him that. We found a lot of skeletal material, but we had very little dietary data. But Gennaro said he knew we hadn't published everything, and he wanted whatever we had, and he offered a very large fee, $50,000. Morris took out a tape recorder and set it onto the table. You mind? No, go ahead. So Gennaro telephoned you in 1984. What happened then? Well, you see our operation here? 50,000 would support 2 full summers of digging. I told him I'd do what I could. So you agreed to prepare a paper for him? Yes. On the dietary habits of juvenile dinosaurs? Yes. You met Gennaro? No, just on the phone. Did Gennaro say why he wanted this information? Yes. He said he was planning on a museum for children, and he wanted to feature baby dinosaurs. He said he was hiring a number of academic consultants and named them. There was paleontologists like me, and a mathematician from Texas named Ian Malcolm, and a couple of ecologists, a systems analysis. Good group. Morris nodded, making notes. So you accepted the consultancy? Yeah, I agreed to send him a summary of our work, what we knew about the habits of duck-billed hadrosaurs we found. What kind of information did you send? Everything. Nesting behaviour, territorial ranges, feeding behaviour, social behaviour. Everything. And, how did you know... Ian from Texas. I don't support this info. Ian's from Texas. Ian's not as suave as this one. Well, he is. He is quite suave, but not as suave as that one. But he is from Texas. How did Gennaro respond? He kept calling and calling, sometimes in the middle of the night. Would the dinosaurs eat this? Would they eat that? Should the exhibit include this? I can never understand why he was so worked up. I mean, I think dinosaurs are important too, but not that important. They've been dead for 65 million years. I think his calls could wait till morning. I see, Morris said. And the $50,000? I got tired of Gennaro and called the whole thing off. We settled for $12,000. That must have been in about the middle of 85. And InGen? Any other contract with them? Not since 1985. And when did the Hammond Foundation begin to fund your research? I'll have a look, but it was around the mid-80s. And you know Hammond is just the rich dinosaur enthusiast? Yes. Morris made another note. Look, if the EPA is so concerned about John Hammond and what he's doing, the dinosaur sites in the north and the amber purchases in the island in Costa Rica, why don't you just ask him? At the moment we can't, Morris said. Why not? Grant said. Because we don't have any evidence of wrongdoing, but personally I think it's clear that John Hammond is evading the law. I was first contacted, Morris explained, by the Office of Technological Transfer, the OTT monitors shipments of American technology which might have military significance. They called to say that InGen had 2 areas of possible illegal technology transfer. First, InGen shipped 3 Cray XMPs to Costa Rica. InGen characterised it as a transfer within corporate divisions and said they weren't for resale, but OTT couldn't imagine why the hell somebody need power in Costa Rica. 3 Crays? Is that a kind of computer? Morris nodded. Very powerful supercomputers. To put it into perspective, 3 Crays represent more computer power than any privately held company in America. And InGen sent these machines to Costa Rica. You have to wonder why. I give up. Why? Grant said. Nobody knows, and the hoods are even more worrisome. Hoods are automated gene sequencers, machines that work out the genetic code by themselves. They're so new that they have been put on the restricted list yet. But any genetic engineering lab is likely to have one. If it can afford the $500,000 price tag. He flipped through his notes. Well, it seems InGen shipped 24 hood sequencers to their island in Costa Rica. Again, they said it was a transfer within divisions and not an export. There wasn't much that OTT could do. They're not officially concerned with use. But InGen was obviously setting up one of the most powerful genetic engineering facilities in the world in an obscure Central American country. A country with no regulations. That kind of things happened before. There'd already been cases of American bioengineering companies moving to another country. so that they would be not hampered by regulations and rules. The most flagrant, Morris, was the bison rabies case. In 1986, Genetic Bison Corporation of Cupertino tested a bioengineered rabies vaccine on a farm in Chile. They didn't inform the government of Chile or the farm workers involved. They simply released the vaccine. The vaccine consisted of live rabies viruses genetically modified to be non-virulent, but the virulence hadn't been tested. Bison didn't know whether the virus could still cause rabies or not. Even worse, the virus had been modified. Ordinarily, you couldn't contact rabies unless you'd been bitten by an animal. But Bison modified the rabies virus to cross the Penelope alveolo. Sure. God, talking this much hurts. You could get an infection just inhaling it. Bison staffers brought the live rabies virus down to Chile in a carry-on bag on a commercial airline flight. Morris often wondered what would have happened if the capsule had broken open during that flight. Everyone on that plane might have been infected with rabies. It was outrageous, it was irresponsible, it was criminally negligent, close enough, and no action was taken against Bison. The Chilean farmers who unwittingly risked their lives were ignorant peasants. The government of Chile had an economic crisis to worry about, and the American authorities had no jurisdiction. So, Lewis Dodson, the geneticist responsible for the test, was still working on Bison. Bison was still reckless as ever, and other American companies was hurrying to set up facilities in foreign countries that lacked sophistication about genetic research. Countries that perceived genetic engineering to be like any other high-tech development and thus welcomed into their lands unaware of the dangers posed. So that's why we began our investigations of InGen about 3 weeks ago. And what have you actually found? Grant asked. Not much, Morris admitted. When I go back to San Francisco, we'll probably have to close the investigation. I think I'm about finished here. He started packing up his briefcase. By the way, what does juvenile hyperspace mean? That's just a fancy label for my report, Grant said. Hyperspace is a term for multidimensional space, like three-dimensional tic-tac-toe. If you were to take all the behaviours of an animal, its eating and movement and sleeping, you could plot the animal within multidimensional space. Some paleontologists refer to the behaviour of an animal as occurring in an ecological hyperspace. Juvenile hyperspace would just refer to the behaviour of juvenile dinosaurs, if you wanted to be as pretentious as possible. At the far end of the trailer, the phone rang. Ellie answered, and she said, he's in a meeting right now. Can he call you back? Morris snapped his briefcase shut and stood. Thanks for your help on the beer. No problem. Grant walked with Morris down the trailer to the door at the far end. Morris said, Did Hammond ever ask for any physical materials from your site? Bones or eggs or anything like that? No, Grant said. Dr. Sattler mentioned you do some genetic work here. Well, not exactly, Grant said. When we remove fossils that are broken or for some reason not suitable for museum preservation, we send the bones out to the lab that grinds them up and tries to extract proteins for us. These proteins are then identified and the report is sent back to us. Which lab is that? Medical Biological Services in Salt Lake. How did you choose them? Competitive bids. The lad has nothing to do with InGen? Not that I know of. They came to the door of the trailer. Grant opened it and felt the rush of hot air from outside. Morris paused to put on his sunglasses. One last thing, Morris said. Suppose InGen wasn't really making a museum exhibit. Is there anything else they could have done with the information in the report you gave them? Grant laughed. Sure. They could feed a baby hadrosaur. Morris laughed too. A baby hadrosaur, that'd be something to see. How big were they? About so. Holding his hands, 6 inches apart. Squirrel size. How long before they become fully grown? 3 years, Grant said. Give or take. Morris held out his hand. Well, thanks again for your help. Take it easy driving back, Grant said. He watched for a moment as Morris walked back towards the car and closed the door. Grant said, What do you think? Ellie shrugged. Naive. You like the part where John Hammond is the evil arch-villain? Grant laughed. John Hammond's about as sinister as Walt Disney. By the way, who called? Oh, it was a woman named Alice Levin. She works at Columbia Medical Center. You know her? Grant shook his head. No. Well, it was something about identifying some remains. She wants you to call her back right away. This is a surprise tour that will be used later. The surprise tour of being a little bitch. I am going to quickly take some meds because Jesus Christ. Why is my head just fucked? It's like, I think it never fully disappeared from yesterday. What? I'll take the good kush. We'll take the good kush. Honestly, no, literally, like, I was on the phone to John, and that's when it started to come through, but then all of my teeth started to hurt, and that was to do with my sinuses being really blocked. So I was like, shit, maybe it's all connected. And then I sort of was fine, was doing bits and bobs, and then literally it got to about 4 o'clock, and I was basically passed out on the bed. But the headache sort of disappeared when I had dinner, and then it's come back. So it's like, yeah, more than likely the lights and stuff aren't helping. But also, it's not like I'm drinking anything good anyway. But I don't really fancy risking it with a different kind of drink. But also, it could be. You know, that. Either or. Ooh. Popping pills on stream, totally normal. Normal thing to do. Let's drink the normal way. Ooh. Cool. Alright. Woo. There you go, maybe I'll just put some less pressure on the head. Whoa. Right. I fear we're not going to do this in 4 streams. Why not? What do you mean? Told me I'd read it in 9 hours. And we're nearly done for the day. That's how much we've got left of today. 9 hours split into 3. It's 3 hours a pop. We're not even at 2 hours yet. What do you mean? Also, what do you mean 4 streams? We're doing this in 3. We're not doing this in 4. We're doing this in 3. There's only 3 streams of this month. Look, I sent you an entire rundown. I sent you the hows, the whys, and the wheres. What do you mean? Plus, the middle one I'm going to start probably like half an hour earlier. But yeah, like, come on. What do you mean? I sent you a whole rundown. Anyway, back to the book. Skeleton. Ellie Sattler brushed a strand of blonde hair back from her face. 3. Took us 90 minutes to get to 11%. Yeah, but again, you've got to remember that we said originally the audiobook's 15 hours. Remember we had that discussion? That I would have to do 5-hour streams, and we worked out based on reading speed and everything like that it would take me 9. No, the math taken. Yeah, 3. There's no room for you want other games and people want to play group stuff, so there is no other way, and we have 2 cons to deal with this month. So I did an entire rundown. Again, it's only one. We've only not even been going 2 hours. And again, yes, you're looking at it as percentage instead of actually just looking at the book. The good stuff's coming. So yeah, that's what I mean. I said, like, the longest I'd be, there would be 3 hours on it. 3 hours at minimum, and then if not, it'll be like up to 5. And even then, I think the big bit is going to be, there's 3rd. Are you 5th? That's 4th. Because that's just 3rd. That's number 3. This is why 3 and 4 are together, because 4 that's next week. That's why next week I'm probably going to start a bit earlier and go. And I think I'm doing it on a Saturday so I can go as long as I want to. No rush of work the next day. Damn. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's why I sent a whole rundown of it, because I had to set it out. That's why I was like, if we, finish this one quite quick, or thing, then, because like I said, that's all that's left. Then I can already start into the third. But if not, I'm probably going to start the other one at like 7 and go to midnight. Doesn't bother me too much. Ellie sat to brush the strand of blonde hair back from her face and turned her attention to the acid baths. She had 6 in a row at molar strength from 5 to 30%. She had to keep an eye on the stronger solutions, because they would eat through the limestone and begin to erode the bones, and the infant dinosaur bones were so fragile. She marvelled that they had been preserved at all after 80 million years. She listened idly to Grant and said, "Miss Levin, this is Alan Grard. What's that about a... You have what? A what?" He began to laugh. "Oh, I very much doubt that, Miss Levin. No, I really don't have to... I'm sorry. Well, I'd take a look, but I can pretty much guarantee it's a basilisk lizard. But yes, you can do that. All right, send it now." Grant hung up and shook her head. Oh, these people. Ellie said, "What's it about?" "Some lizard she's trying to identify. She's going to fax me an x-ray." He walked over to the fax and waited for as the transmission came through. "Incidentally, I've got a new find for you. A good one." "Yes?" Grant nodded. "Found it just before the kids showed up. On South Hill, Horizon 4, infant velociraptor. Jaw and complete detention. So there's no question about identity, and the site looks undisturbed. We might even get a full skeleton." "That's fantastic," Ellie said. "How young?" "Young." Move you down a bit. "Maybe 2, maybe 4 months at most, and it's definitely a velociraptor?" "Definitely. Maybe our luck has finally turned." For the last 2 years at Snakewater, the team had activated only duck-billed hadrosaurs. They already had evidence for fast herds of these grazing dinosaurs, roaming the Cretaceous plains in groups of 10 or 20,000, as buffalo would later roam. And increasingly, the question that faced them was, where were the predators? They expected predators to be rare, of course. Studies of predator-prey populations in the game parks of Africa and India suggested that, roughly speaking, there were only one predatory carnivore for every 400 herbivores. That meant a herd of 10,000 duckbills would support only 25 Tyrannosaurus, so it's unlikely that they would find the remains of a large predator. But where were the smaller predators? Snakewater had dozens of nesting sites, in some places the ground was initially covered with fragments of dinosaur eggshells, and many small dinosaurs ate eggs. Animals like Dromaeosaurus, Oviraptor, Velociraptor, and Coelurus. Predators 3 to 6 feet tall. Must have been found in abundance. But they have discovered none so far. Perhaps the Velociraptor skeleton did mean their luck had changed, and an infant. Ellie knew that one of Alan Grant's dreams was to study infant rearing behaviour in carnivores. Every time. And as he had studied the behaviour of herbivores, perhaps this was the first step towards the dream. "You must be pretty excited," Ellie said. Grant didn't answer. "I said you must be pretty excited," Ellie repeated. "My God," Grant said as he was staring at the fax. Ellie looked over Grant's shoulder at the x-ray and breathed out slowly. "You think it's an amyscus? Amyscus? I fucking don't know. Yes, or a triasis. The skeleton's so light. But it's no lizard," she said. "No, that is not a lizard. No 3-toed lizard has walked on this planet for 200 million years." Ellie thought at first she was looking at a hoax. An ingenious, skillful hoax, but a hoax nonetheless. Every biologist knew that the threat of a hoax was omnipresent. The most famous hoax, the Piltdown Man, had gone undetected for 40 years, and his perpetrator was still unknown. More recently, the distinguished astronomer Fred Hoyle had claimed that a fossil-winged dinosaur, Archaeopteryx, on display in the Great British Museum, was a fraud. It was later shown to be genuine. The essence of a successful hoax was that it presented scientists with what they expected to see. And to Ellie's eye, the X-ray image of the lizard was exactly correct. 3-toed foot was well balanced, and with the medical claw of the smallest. The bony remnants of the 4th and 5th toes were located up near the metatarsal joint. The tibia was strong and considerably longer than the femur. At the hip, the acetabulum, sure, why not, was complete. This tail showed 45 vertebrae. It was a young Procopnathus. Compy. Could this x-ray be faked? I don't know, Grant said, but it's almost impossible to fake an x-ray. And Compy is an obscure animal. Even people familiar with dinosaurs never heard of it. Ellie read the note. Specimen acquired on the beach of Cabo Blanco, July 16th. Apparently a howler monkey was eating the animal. And that this was all that was recovered. Oh, and it says the lizard attacked a little girl. I doubt that. But perhaps Compy was so small and light, we assume it must be a scavenger, only feeding off dead carcasses. And you can tell the size, he measured quickly. It's about 20 centimetres to the hips, which means the full animal will be about a foot tall. As big as a chicken. Even a child will look pretty fearsome to it. It might bite an infant, but not a child. Ellie frowned at the x-ray image. You think this could really be a legitimate rediscovery? Like the coelacanths? The coelacanth. Close enough. Maybe, Grant said. The coelacanth was a 5-foot-long fish thought to have died out 65 million years ago until a specimen was pulled from the ocean in 1938. But there were other examples. The Australian mountain pygmy possum was also known for fossils until a live one was found in a garbage can in Melbourne, and a 10,000-year-old fossil fruit bat from New Guinea was described by a zoologist who not long after received a living specimen in the mail. But could it be real? What about the age? Grant nodded. The age is a problem. Most rediscovered animals were rather recent additions to fossil record, 10 or 20,000 years. Some were a few million years old. In the case of the coelacanth, 65 million years old. But the specimens were looking at a much, much older than that. Dinosaurs had died out in the Cretaceous period, 65 million years ago. They had flourished as the dominant life form on the planet in the Jurassic, 190 million years ago, and they had first appeared in the Triassic, roughly 220 million years ago. It was during the early Triassic period that Compy had lived, a time so distant that our planet didn't even look the same. All the continents were joined together in single landmass called Pangaea. When extended from the north to the South Pole, a vast continent of ferns and forests with a large few deserts. The Atlantic Ocean was a narrow lake between what would become Africa and Florida. The air was denser, the land was warmer, there were hundreds of active volcanoes, and it was the environment that Compy lived. Well, Ellie said, we know animals have survived. Crocodiles are basically Triassic animals living in the present. Sharks are Triassic too. So we know it's happened before. Grant nodded. And the thing is, he said, how else do we explain it either? It's either a fake, which I doubt, or it's a recent discovery. What else could it be? The phone rang. Alice Levin again, Grant said. Let's see if she'll send us the actual specimen, he answered. And looked at Ellie surprised. Yes, I'll hold for Mr. Hammond. Yes, of course. Hammond? What does he want? Ellie said. Grant shook his head and then he said on the phone, Yes, Mr. Hammond, it's good to hear your voice too. Yes, he looked at Ellie. Oh, you did? Oh yes, is that right? He cupped his hand over the mouthpiece and said, Still as adventurous as ever, you've got to hear this. Grant pushed the speaker button and Ellie heard a raspy old man's voice speaking rapidly. Hell of annoyance for some EPA fellow, seems to have gone off half-cocked all on his own, running around the country, talking to people. Stirring up things. I don't suppose anyone's come to see you way out there. As a matter of fact, Grant said, somebody did come to see me. Hammond snorted. I was afraid of that. Some smart-ass kid named Morris? Yes, his name was Morris, Grant said. I was going to see all our consultants, Hammond said. You went to see Malcolm the other day. You know, the mathematician in Texas? That's the first I knew of it. We're having one of a time getting a handle on this thing. It's typical of the way government operates. There isn't any complaint. There isn't any change, just harassment from some kid who's unsupervised and is running around at the taxpayer's expense. Did he bother you? Disrupt your work? No, he didn't bother me. Well, that's too bad in a way, because I'd try and get an injunction to stop him if he had. And it's as I had lawyers call over at the EPA to find out what the hell their problem is. The head of the office claims he didn't know there was any investigation. You figure that one out. Damn bureaucracy is it all. Hell, I think the kid's trying to get down to Costa Rica, poke around, get onto our island. You know, we have an island down there. No, Clarence said, looking at Ali. I didn't know. Oh, yes, we brought it and started our own operation 4 or 5 years ago. I forgot exactly. Called Isle Nublar. Big island, 100 miles offshore, going to be a biological preserve. Wonderful place. Tropical jungle. You know, you ought to see it, Dr. Grant. Sounds interesting, Grant said. But actually, it's almost finished now, you know, Hammond said. I've seen you sent some material. Did you get any of my material? No, but we're pretty far from... Oh, maybe it'll come today. Look it over. The island's just beautiful. It's got everything. We've been in construction now for 30 months. You can imagine. Big park. Opens in September next year. You really ought to go see it. It sounds wonderful, but as a matter of fact, I'm going to insist you see it, Dr. Grant. I know you find it right up your alley. You'll find it fascinating. I'm in the middle of... Grant said. Say... Tell you what, Hammond said as if the idea had just occurred to him. I'm having some of the people who consulted for us go down there this weekend. Spend a few days and look it over. At our expense, of course. It'd be terrific if you could give us your opinion. I couldn't possibly, Grant said. Oh, just for the weekend, Hammond said with that irritating, cheery persistence of an old man. That's all I'm talking about, Dr. Grant. I wouldn't want to interrupt your work. I know how important that work is. Believe me. I know. Never interrupt your work. But you could hop on down there this weekend and be back on Monday. No, I couldn't, Grant said. I've just found a new skeleton and yes, fine. But I still think you could come, Hammond said, not really listening. And we just received some evidence from a very puzzling and remarkable find which seems to be a living compy. A what? Hammond said, slowing down. I didn't quite get that. You said a living compy. That's right, Grant said. It's a biological specimen, a partial fragment of an animal collected from Central America. A living animal. You don't say, Hammond said. A living animal? How extraordinary. Yes, Grant said. We think so too, so you see this isn't the time for me to be leaving Central America, did you say? Yes. Where in Central America is it from, do you know? A beach called Cabo Blanco? I don't exactly see. I see. Hammond cleared his throat. And when did this specimen arrive in your hands? Just today. Today, I see. Today, I see. Yes. Hammond cleared his throat again. Grant looked at Ellie and mouthed, What's going on? Ellie shook her head. Sounds upset. Grant mouthed, See if Morris is still here. She went to look out the window. She went to the window and looked out, but Morris's car was gone. She turned back. On the speaker, Hammond coughed. Dr. Grant, have you told anybody about it yet? No. Good. That's good. Well, yes, I'll tell you frankly, Dr. Grant, I'm having a little problem about this island. The EPA thing is coming at the wrong time. How's that? Grant said. We have our problems and some delays. Let's just say I'm under a little pressure here, and I'd like for you to look at this island for me. Give me your opinion. I'll be paying you the usual weekend consultancy rate of $20,000 a day. That'll be $60,000 for 3 days, and if you can spare Dr. Sattler, she'll go at the same rate. We need a botanist. What do you say? Ellie looked at Grant as he said, Well, Mr. Hammond, that much money would fully finance our expeditions for the next 2 summers. Good. Good, Hammond said blandly. He seemed distracted now, his thoughts elsewhere. I want this to be easy. Now, I'm sending a corporate jet to pick you up at the private airfield east of Chateau. You know the one I mean. It's only about 2 hours' drive from where you are. You'd be there at 5 p.m. tomorrow and I'll be waiting for you. Take you right down. Can you and Dr. Sattler make that plane? I guess we can. Good. Pack lightly. You don't need passports. I'm looking forward to it. See you tomorrow, Hammond said, and he hung up. Cohen, Swain, and Ross. Midday sun streamed into San Francisco law offices of Cohen, Swain, and Ross, giving the room a cheerfulness that Donald Gennaro did not feel. He listened on the phone and looked at his boss, Daniel Ross, cold as an undertaker in his dark pinstripe suit. I understand, John, Gennaro said, and Grant agreed to come? Good. Good, yes, that sounds fine to me. My congratulations, John. He hung up the phone and turned to Ross. We can't trust Hammond anymore. He's under too much pressure. The EPA is investigating him. He's behind on schedule of his Costa Rican resort, and the investors are getting nervous. There have been too many rumours of problems down there. Too many workmen have died, and now the business about the living Promco whatever on the mainland. What do you mean? Ross said. Maybe nothing, Gennaro said, but Hamachi is one of our principal investors. I got a report last week from Hamachi's representative in San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica. According to the report, some new kind of lizard is biting children off the coast. Ross blinked. New lizard? Yes, Gennaro said. We can't screw around with this. We've got to inspect the island right away. I've asked Hammond to arrange independent sites inspections every week for the next 3 weeks. What does Hammond say? He insists nothing's wrong with the island, claims he has all the security precautions. But you don't believe him, Ross said. No, Gennaro said, I don't. Donald Gennaro had come to Cohen Swain from a background of investment banking. Cohen Swain's high-tech client frequently needed capitalization, and Gennaro helped them find the money. One of his first assignments back in 1982 had been to accompany John Hammond while the old man, then nearly 70, put together the funding to start InGen Corporation. They eventually reached almost $1 billion, and Gennaro remembered it was a wild ride. Hammond's a dreamer, Gennaro said. A potentially dangerous dreamer, Ross said. We should never have got involved. What is our financial position? The firm, Gennaro said, owns 5%. General or limited? General. Ross shook his head. We should never have done that. It seemed wise at the time, Gennaro said. Hell, it was 8 years ago. We took it in lieu on some fees, and if you remember, Hammond's plan was extremely speculative. He was really pushing the envelope. Nobody thought he could pull it off. But apparently he has, Ross said. In any case, I agree that an inspection is overdue. What about your site experts? I'm starting with the experts Hammond already hired as consultants early in this project. First group is a paleontologist, a paleobotanist, and a mathematician. They go down this weekend, and I'll go with them. Will they tell you the truth? Ross said. I think so. None of them had much to do with the island, and one of them, the mathematician, Ian Malcolm, was openly hostile to the project from the start, insisted it would never work, could never work. And who else? Just the technical person, the computer system analysis. Review the park's computers, fix some bars. He should be there by Friday morning. Fine. You're making the arrangements? Hammond asked to place the calls himself. I think he pretend he's not in trouble, that it's just a social invitation, showing off his island. All right, Ross said. But just make sure it happens. Stay on top of it. I want the Costa Rican situation resolved within a week. Ross got up and walked out of the room. Gennaro dialed, hearing the whiny hiss of the radio phone, and then he heard the voice say, Grant here. Hi, Dr. Grant. This is Donald Gennaro. I'm the general consul for InGen. We talked a few years back. I don't know if you remember. I remember, Grant said. Well, Gennaro said, I just got off the phone with John Hammond, who tells me the good news that you're coming down to our island in Costa Rica. Yeah, I guess we're going down there tomorrow. Well, I just wanted to extend my thanks to you for doing this on such short notice. Everybody at InGen appreciates it. We've asked Ian Malcolm, who, like you, was one of the early consultants, to come down as well. He's the mathematician at UT in Austin. John Hammond mentioned that, Grant said. Well, good, Gennaro said, and I'll be coming too. As a matter of fact, by the way, this specimen you have found of a Procom... What is it? Procon, not that. Fucking compy. It's the only one I fucking hate saying. Fucking compy. Yes. Do you have the specimen with you, Dr. Grant? Like, the actual specimen? No, Grant said. I've only seen an x-ray. The specimen is in New York. A woman from Columbia University called me. Well, I wonder if you could give me the details on that, Gennaro said. Then I can run down that specimen for Mr. Hammond, who's very excited about it. I'm sure you'd want to see the actual specimen too. Perhaps I can even get it delivered to the island while you're all down there. Grant gave him the information. Well, that's fine, Dr. Grant, Gennaro said. My regards to Dr. Sattler. I look forward to meeting you and him tomorrow. And hung up. Yes. Every time Gennaro did think Ellie was a man for a good while. I support just saying, so much fun. Procom Sinathus. It's such a... You have to say it slowly. It's not a good dinosaur name. phone keeps flashing at me. I don't know if it's just normal. No, it is just doing absolutely nothing. Oh no, it's just Kit sending me fucking Instagrams. Okay. I haven't looked at him in a while. That's a given. What a fool. Yeah, Gennaro is an idiot. But look at how he dies. But look at how he dies. Where did I get to? Okay, yeah. Plans. This just came, Ellie said the next... I'm going to have to lean back for a bit. Right, come up to my... Hello. Hope this is really nice if you have headphones on. Blah, 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 blah. I'm going to read the book like this from now on. Woman in STEM. Blip, 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 blip. This just came, Ellie said the next day, walking to the back of the trailer with a thick manila envelope. One of the kids brought it back from town. It's from Hammond. I do have it. Hope that felt nice. Hope it was really, really, really peaceful, really sleep time. Nap time. Grant noticed the blue and white InGen logo. I can't see shit, but my fucking eyeline is just on this mic. It's the only time I wish I just like a little fucking do my headphones, shitty headphones. It felt invasive. What do you mean it's great ASMR? Go to sleep, go to sleep. Inside there was no cover letter, just a bound stack of paper. Pulling it out, he discovered it was blueprints. They reduced, forming a thick book. The cover was marked, Isle Nublar, Resort Guest Facilities, Full Set, Safari Lodge. What the hell is this? He said. As he flipped open the book, a sheet of paper fell out. Dear Alan and Ellie, as you can imagine, we don't have much in the way of the formal pages and stuck together promotional materials yet, but this should give you some idea of the Isle Nublar project. I think it's very exciting. Looking forward to discussing this with you. Hope you can join us. Regards, John. I don't get it, Grant said. These are architectural plans. He turned to the top sheet. There is like a whole fucking little chart. Visitor Centre Lodge. Isle Nublar Resort. Client. InGen. Architects. Bunch of people. Engineers. Another bunch of people. Landscaping. More people. Electrical. People. Computer. Dennis Nedgery. I love how Lexa's responding every time I come to the computer, and the cat outside's getting offended. Rip to that cat. Probably got taken by a raptor. Like, damn. But yeah, little fat fucking Nedgery. Anyway, boring names. Grant turned to the plans themselves. They were stamped... This is literally how it's gonna be, fucking over. Because, like, Jesus Christ, all I can see is this mic out of the fucking... my visual... my eye line. That's how it's gonna be. Anyway. Grant plans themselves. They were stamped industrial secrets. Do not copy confidential work. Ooh. Not for distribution. Each sheet was numbered. At the top, all I can hear is the dinosaurs in my ears. These plans represent the confidential creations of InGen Inc. You must have signed the document 1112 11248 or your risk of prosecution. Looks pretty paranoid to me, he said. Maybe there's a reason, Ellie said. The next page was a topological map. It showed Isle Nublar as the inverted teardrop, bulging at the north, tapering at the south. The island was 8 miles long, and the map divided into several large sections. The northern section was marked Visitor Area, and it contained structures marked Visitor Arrivals, Visitor Center Administration, Power Desalinization, bulging, lol, I fucking thought that would get you, Hammond Res, and Safari Lodge. Grant could see the outline of the swimming pool, the rectangles of tennis courts, and the round squiggles that represented planting and shrubbery. Looks like a resort, all right. There followed detailed sheets of the Safari Lodge itself. The elevation sketches. The lodge looked dramatic. A long, low building with a series of pyramid shapes off the roof. But there was little about the other buildings in the visitor area. The rest of the island was even more mysterious. As far as Grant could tell, it was mostly open space. A network of road, tunnels, outlying buildings, and a long, thin lake that appeared to be man-made, with concrete dams and barriers. But for most part, the island was divided into big curving areas with very little development at all. Each area was marked by codes. /P/V2A/V2A/TRIC/L5A blah 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 blah. Anyway, fucking there's a lot of ///. Anyway. Is there an explanation for the codes? She said. Grant flipped through the pages rapidly, but he couldn't find one. Maybe they took it out, she said. I'm telling you, Grant said. Paranoid. He looked at the big curving divisions, separated from one another by a network of roads. There was only 6 divisions on the whole island, and each division was separated on the road by a concrete moat. Outside each moat was a fence with a little lightning sign alongside of it. That mystified them until they were finally able to figure out that it meant the fences were electrified. That's odd, she said. Electrified fences at a resort. Miles of them, Grant said. Electrified fences and moats together, and usually with a road alongside them as well. Just like a zoo, Ellie said. They went back to the topological map and looked closely at the contour lines. The roads had been placed oddly. The main road ran north-south, right through the central hills of the island, including one section of the road that seemed to be literally cut off to the side of a cliff above a river. It began to look as if there had been a deliberate effort to leave these areas open as big enclosures, separated from the roads by moats and electric fences, and the roads were raised up above the ground so you could see over the fences. You know, Ellie said, some of these dimensions are enormous. Look at this. This concrete moat is 30 feet wide. That's like a military fortification. So are these buildings, Grant said. He had noticed that each open division had a few buildings, usually located in out-of-the-way corners, but the buildings were all concrete, with thick walls. In side view elevations, they looked like concrete bunkers with small windows, like the Nazi pillboxes from old war movies. At the moment, they heard a muffled explosion, and Grant put the papers aside. Back to work, he said. Fire! There was a slight vibration, and then yellow contour lines traced across the computer screen. This time, resolution was perfect, and Alan Grant had the glimpse of a skeleton, beautifully defined, the long neck arched back. It was unquestionably an infant velociraptor, and it looked perfect, and the screen went blank. I hate computers, Grant said. Not you, Alexa. Squinting into the sun. What happened now? Lost the integrator input, one of the kids said. Just a minute. The kid bent to look back at the tangle of wires going to the back of the battery-powered portable computer. They had set the computer up on a beer carton on the top of Hill 4, not far from the device they called the Thumper. Grant sat down at the side of the hill and looked at his watch. He said to Ellie, We're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way. One of the kids overheard. Aw, Alan. Look, Grant said. I've got a plane to catch, and I want the fossil protected before I go. Once you began to expose a fossil, you had to continue or risk losing it. Visitors imagined the landscape of the Badlands to be unchanging, but in fact it was continuously eroding, literally right before your eyes. All day long you could hear the clatter of pebbles rolling down the crumbling hillside, and there was always risk of a rainstorm. Even a brief shower would wash away a delicate fossil. Thus Grant's partial exposed silicon was at risk, and it had to be protected until he returned. Fossil protection ordinarily consisted of a tarp over the site, and a trench around the perimeter to control water runoff. The question is how large a trench the Velociraptor fossil required. To decide that, they were using computer-assisted sonar technology, or CAST. This was the new procedure in which Thumper fired a soft lead slug into the ground, setting up shock waves that were read by the computer assembled in some kind of X-ray on the hillside. They had been using it all summer with varying results. Thumper was 20 feet away now, a big silver box on wheels with an umbrella on top of it. It looked like an ice cream vendor's push car. Parked on the Badlands. Let's go with that. Thumper had 2 useful attendants loading the next soft lead pellet. So far, the CAST program merely located the extent of helping Grant's team to dig more efficiently. But the kids claim that within a few years it will be possible to generate an image so detailed, Excavation would be redundant. You could get a perfect image of the bones in 3 dimensions, and it promised a whole new era of archaeology without excavation. But none of that had happened yet, and the equipment that worked where am I? And the equipment that worked flawlessly in the university laboratory proved pitiful, delicate, and fickle in this field. How much longer? Grant said. We got it now, Alan. It's not bad. Grant went to look at the computer screen. He saw the complete skeleton traced in bright yellow. It was indeed a young specimen, the outlying characteristics of a velociraptor, the single-toed claw, which in full-grown animal was curved 6-inch long weapon capable of ripping open its prey, which in an infant no larger than, the thorn of a roebush. It was hardly visible at all on screen, and Velociraptor was a lightly built dinosaur in any case, an animal as fine boned as a bird, presumably as intelligent. Here the skeleton appeared in perfect order, except the head and the neck were bent back towards the posterior. Such neck flexation was so common in fossils that some scientists have formulated a theory to explain it, suggesting that dinosaurs had become extinct because they had been poisoned by the evolving alkaloids in plants. The twisted neck was thought to signify the death of agony of the dinosaurs. Grant had finally put that one to rest by demonstrating that many species of birds and reptiles underwent a post-mortem contraction of posterior neck ligaments, which bent the head backwards in a characteristic way. It had nothing to do with the cause of the death. It had to do with the way the carcass dried in the sun. Grant saw this particular skeleton had also been twisted laterally, so the right leg and foot were raised up the backbone. It looks like... I can't see. Light. It looks kind of distorted, one of the kids said, but I don't think it's the computer. No, Grant said, it's just time. Lots and lots of time. Grant knew that the people could not imagine geological time. Human life was lived on another scale of time entirely. An apple turned brown in a few minutes, silverware turned black in a few days, and a compost heap decaying in a season. A child grew in a decade. None of these everyday human experiences prepare people to be able to imagine the meaning of 80 million years, the length of time that had passed since this little animal had died. In the classroom, Grant had tried different comparisons. If you imagine the human lifespan of 60 years was compressed to a day, then 80 million years would still be like 3,652 years older than the pyramids. The Velociraptor had been dead a long time. Doesn't look very fearsome, one of the kids said. He wasn't, Grant said. At least, not until he grew up. Probably this baby had scavenged, feeding off carcasses slain by the adults after the big animals had gorged themselves and lay basking in the sun. Carnivores could eat as much as 25% of their body weight in a single meal, and it made them sleepy afterwards. The babies would chitter and scramble over the indulgent, somnolent bodies of the adults and nip little bites from the dead animals. The babies were probably cute little animals. But an adult velociraptor was another matter entirely. Pound for pound, a velociraptor was the most rapacious dinosaur that ever lived. Although relatively small, about 200 pounds, the size of a leopard. Velociraptors were quick, intelligent, vicious, and able to attack with sharp jaws, powerful clawed forearms, and a devastating single claw on the foot. Oh my god, it's Phoenix. What little, just doing nothing. Being a little bitch. Velociraptors hunted in packs, and Grant thought it must have been a sight to see a dozen of animals racing at full speed, leaping onto the back of a much larger dinosaur, tearing at the neck, slashing at the ribs and belly, and "We're running out of time," Ellie said, bringing him back. Grant gave instructions for the trench. From the computer image, they knew the skeleton lay in a relatively confined area. A ditch around a 2-metre square would be sufficient. Meanwhile, Ellie lashed down the tarp that covered the sides of the hill. Grant helped her pone in the final stakes. "How did the baby die?" one of the kids asked. "I doubt we'll know," Grant replied. "Infant mortality in the wild is high. In African parks, it runs at 70% among some carnivores. It could have been anything. Disease, separation from the group, anything. Even attacked by an adult. We don't know. We know these animals hunted in pack, but we don't know anything about their social behaviour in the group." It gets fucking way worse. Grant has autism. Of course he does. He's a fucking dino nerd. The students nodded. They had all studied animal behaviour, and they knew, for example, that when a new male took over the lion pride, the first thing he did was kill all the cubs. The reason was apparently genetic. The male had evolved to... Give me my music back. The male had evolved I don't know where I'm actually reading. Yes, to decimate its genes as widely as possible, and by killing the cubs he brought all the females into heat so he would impregnate them. It would also prevent the females from wasting their time nurturing offspring from another male. Perhaps the Velociraptor hunting band was also ruled by the dominant male. They knew so little about dinosaurs, Grant thought. After 150 years of research and excavation, all around the world, they still knew nothing about what dinosaurs had really been like. We've got to go, Ellie said, if we're going to get to the chateau by 5. Hammond. Gennaro's secretary bustled in with a new suitcase, still had the sale tags on. You know, Mr. Gennaro, she said, when you forgot to pack, it makes me think you don't really want to go on this trip. Maybe you're right, Gennaro said. I'm missing my kid's birthday. Oh, yes, I forgot he has a family in this. Missing my kid's birthday. Saturday was Amanda's birthday. Elizabeth had invited 20 screaming 4-year-olds to share it, as well as Cappy the Clown and a magician. His wife hadn't been happy to hear that Gennaro was going out of town. Neither had Amanda. Well, I did my best I could on a short notice. There's running shoes of your size, khaki shorts, shirts and a shaving kit. A pair of jeans and a sweatshirt if you get cold. The car is downstairs to take you to the airport. You have to leave now to make the flight. You'll be missing more than that. Your kid. I can't remember how does. He lasts a lot longer than he does in the movie, I'm pretty sure. In this. She left. Gennaro walked down the hallway, tearing the sales tag off the suitcase as he passed the all-glass conference room. Dan Ross left the table and came outside. Have a good trip, Ross said. But let's be very clear about one thing. I don't know how bad the situation actually is, Donald. And if there is a problem on that island, burn it to the ground. Jesus, Dan. We're talking about big investment. Don't hesitate. Don't think about it. Just do it. Hear me? Gennaro nodded. I hear you, he said. But Hammond, screw Hammond, Ross said. My boy, the familiar raspy voice said. How have you been, my boy? Very well, sir, Gennaro replied. He leaned back into the padded leather chair of the Gulfstream II jet as it flew east toward the Rocky Mountains. You never call me any more, Hammond said reproachfully. I've missed you, Donald. How is your lovely wife? She's fine. Elizabeth's fine. We have a little girl now. Wonderful, wonderful. Children are such a delight. She'd get a kick out of the new park in Costa Rica. Michael Sheen in Prodigal Son. Legit. Gennaro had forgotten how short Hammond was. As he sat in his chair, his feet didn't touch the carpeting. He swung his legs as he talked. There was a childlike quality to the man, even though Hammond must be, 75, 76, something like that? He looked older than Gennaro remembered, but then Gennaro hadn't seen him for almost 5 years. Hammond was flamboyant, a born showman, and back in 1983 he had an elephant that he carried around with him in a little cage. The elephant was 9 inches high and a foot long and perfectly formed, except his tusks were stunted. Hammond took the elephant with him to fundraising meetings. Gennaro usually carried it to the room, the cage covered with a little blanket like a tea cosy, and Hammond would give his usual speech about the prospects for developing what he called consumer biologicals. Then a dramatic moment would whip away the blanket to reveal the elephant, and he would ask for the money. The elephant was always a rousing success. Its tiny body, hardly bigger than a cat's, promised untold wonders that came to the laboratory of Norman Athorn, the Stanford geneticist who was Hammond's partner in the new venture. But as Hammond talked about the elephant, he left a great deal unsaid. For example, Hammond was starting a genetics company, but the tiny elephant hadn't been made by any genetic procedure. Athorn had simply taken a dwarf elephant embryo and raised it in an artificial room with hormonal modifications. That itself was quite an achievement, but nothing like what Hammond hinted he had done before. Also, Atherton had been able to duplicate his miniature elephant, and he tried. For one thing, everybody who saw the elephant wanted one. Then, two, the elephant was prone to colds, particularly during winter. The sneezes coming through the little trunk filled Hammond with dread. And sometimes the elephant would get his tusks stuck in the bars of the cage and snore irritably as he tried to get free. Sometimes he'd get infections around tusk line. Hammond always fretted that the elephant would die, but thought Atheron could grow a replacement. Hammond also concealed from prospective investors the fact that the elephant's behaviour had changed substantially in the process of miniaturization. The little creature might look like an elephant, but he acted like a vicious rodent, quick-moving and mean-tempered. Hammond discouraged people from petting the elephant to avoid nipped fingers. Although Hammond spoke confidently of $7 billion in annual revenues by 1993, his project was intensely speculative. Hammond had a vision and enthusiasm, but there was no certainty that his plan would work at all, particularly since Norman, the brains behind the project, had terminal cancer, and which was the final point Hammond neglected to mention. Even so, with Gennaro's help, Hammond got his money. Between September of 1983 and November of 1985, John Alfred Hammond and his pachyderm portfolio raised $870 million in venture capital to finance his proposed corporation, International Genetics Technologies Inc. And they could have raised more, except Hammond insisted on absolute secrecy. He offered no return on the capital for the last 5 years. That scared a lot of investors off. In the end, they had to take mostly Japanese consortia. The Japanese were the only investors who had the patience. Sitting in the leather chair of the jet, Gennaro thought how invasive Hammond was. The old man was now ignoring the fact that Gennaro's law firm had forced the trip on him. Instead, Hammond behaves as if they had encouraged in purely social outing. "It's too bad you didn't bring your family with you, Donald," he said. Jesus, it's fucking... Who makes a mug like this, man? Who does that? Gennaro shrugged. "It's my daughter's birthday. 20 kids already scheduled. The cake and the clown. You know how it is." "Oh, I understand," Hammond said. She is fucking hefty. She's fucking hefty. I've never used her, and I was like, I'm going to use her today. Fuck me, she's hefty. Kids set their hearts on things. "Anyway, is the park ready for visitors?" Gennaro asked. "Well, not officially," Hammond said. "But the hotel is built, so there is a place to stay. And the animals? Of course, the animals are all there. All in their spaces." Gennaro said, "I remember in the original proposal you was hoping for a total of 12. Oh, we're far beyond that. We have 238 animals, Donald." 238? The old man giggled, pleased at Gennaro's reaction. "You can't imagine it. We have herds of them. 238. How many species?" 15 different species, Donald. "That's incredible. That's fantastic. What about all the other things you wanted? The facilities, the computers, all of it." "All of it," Hammond said. "Everything on the island is state of the art. You'll see for yourself, Donald. It's perfectly wonderful. That's why this concern is so misplaced. There's absolutely no problem with the island." Gennaro said, "Then there should be absolutely no problem with this inspection." "And there isn't," Hammond said, "but it slows things down. Everything has to stop for an official visit. You've had delays anyway. You postponed the opening." "Oh, that." Hammond tugged at the red silk handkerchief at the breast pocket of his sport coat. "It was bound to happen. Bound to happen." "Why?" Gennaro asked. "Well, Donald, to explain that, you have to go back to the initial concept of the resort, the concept of the most advanced amusement park in the world, combining the latest electronic and biological technologies. I'm not talking about rides. Everyone has rides. Coney Island has rides. And these days, everybody has animatronic environments. The haunted house, the pirate's den, the Wild West, the earthquake. Everyone has those things. So we set out to make biological attractions, living attractions, attractions so astonishing they would capture the imagination of the entire world." Gennaro had to smile. It was almost the same speech, word for word, that he had used on investors so many years ago. "And we can never forget the ultimate object of project in Costa Rica, to make money," Hammond said, starting out of the window of the jet. "Lots and lots of money." "I remember," Gennaro said. "And the secret to making money in a park," Hammond said, "is to limit your personal costs. The food handlers, ticket takers, clean-up crews, repair teams, to make the park that runs with minimal staff. That's why we're invested in computer technology. We've automated whatever we could." "I remember. But the plain fact is," Hammond said, "when you put together all the animals and the computer systems, you run into snags. Who ever got a major computer system up and running on schedule? Nobody I know." "So you've just had normal startup delays?" "Yes, that's right, normal delays." "I heard there were accidents during construction," Gennaro said. "Some workman died." Yes, there were several accidents, Hammond said, and a total of 3 deaths. 2 workers died building the cliff road. 1 died as a result of an earth mover accident in January. But we haven't had any accidents for months, he said. He put his hand on the younger man's arm. Donald, he said, believe me. I'll tell you everything on the island is going forward as planned. Everything on that island is perfectly fine. The intercom clicked. The pilot said, seatbelt please. We're landing in Chateau. Dry plains stretched away, distant black buttes. The afternoon wind blew dust and tumbleweed across the cracked concrete. Sis, it's gonna go wrong. Sus. I was like, sis, honey, it's gonna go wrong. Grant stood with Ellie near the jeep and waited while the sleek Grumman jet circled for a landing. I hate to wait on the money men, Grant grumbled. Ellie shrugged. Goes with the job. Although many fields of science, such as physics and chemistry, had become federally funded, paleontology remained strongly dependent on private patrons. Quite apart from his own curiosity about the island in Costa Rica, Grant understood that if John Hammond asked for his help, he would give him. That was how patrons worked. How it always worked. The little jet landed and rolled towards them. Ellie shouldered her bag, the jet came to a stop, and a stewardess in blue uniform opened the door. Inside, he was surprised at how cramped it was, despite the luxury appointments. Grant had to hunch over as he went to shake Hammond's hand. Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler, Hammond said, it's good for you to join us. Allow me to introduce my associate, Donald Gennaro. Gennaro was a stocky, muscular man in his mid-30s, wearing an Armani suit and wire-frame glasses. Now picture the movie. Grant disliked him on sight. He shook hands quickly. When Ellie shook hands, Gennaro said in response, You're a woman. These things happen, she said, and Grant thought she didn't like him either. Hammond turned to Gennaro. You know, of course, what Dr. Grant and Dr. Sadler do. They are paleontologists. They dig up dinosaurs. And then he began to laugh, as if he found the idea very funny. Take your seats, please, the stewardess said, closing the door immediately. The plane began to move. You'll have to excuse us, but we're in a bit of a rush. Donald thinks it's important we get right down there. The pilot announced 4 hours time flying to Dallas, where they would refuel and then go to Costa Rica, arriving the following morning. And how long will we be in Costa Rica? Grant asked. Well, that really depends, Gennaro said. We have a few things to clear up. Take my word for it, Hammond said, turning to Grant. We'll be down there for no more than 48 hours. Grant buckled his seatbelt. This island of yours that we're going to, I haven't heard about it before. Is it some kind of secret? In a way, Hammond said. We've been very, very careful about making sure nobody knows about it until the day we're finally open that island to surprise and delighted public. Target of opportunity. The Bison Corporation, I'm just calling it fucking the Bison. Bison had never called an emergency meeting of its board of directors. The 10 directors now sitting in the comfort room were irritable and impatient. It was 8 p.m. They had been talking among themselves for the last 10 minutes, but slowly had fallen silent, shuffling papers, looking pointedly at their watches. What are we waiting for? One asked. One more, Lewis Dodgen said. We need one more. He glanced at his watch. Ron Meyer's office had said he was coming up at the 6 o'clock plane from San Diego. He should be here by now, even allowing for traffic from the airport. You need a quorum? Another director asked. Yes, Dodgen said. We do. That shut them up for a moment. A quorum meant that they were going to be asked to make an important decision, and God knows they were. Although Dodgen would have preferred not to call the meeting at all. But Steingarten, the head of Bison, was adamant. You'll have to get their agreement for this one, Lou, he said. Depending on who he talked to, Lewis Dodgson was famous as the most aggressive geneticist of his generation, or the most reckless. 34, balding, hawk-faced, and intense. He had been dismissed by John Hopkins as a graduate student for playing gene therapy on human patients without obtaining the proper FDA protocols. Hired by Bison, he had conducted the controversial rabies vaccine test in Chile. Now he was the head of product development at Bison, which supposedly consisted of reverse engineering, taking a Peterson project, tearing it apart, learning how it worked, and then making your own version. In practice, it involved industrial espionage, most of it directed towards the InGen Corporation. In the 1980s, a few genetic engineering companies began to ask, what is the biological equivalent of a Sony Walkman? These companies weren't interested in pharmaceuticals or health. They were interested in entertainment, sports, leisure activities, cosmetics, and pets. The perceived demand for consumer biologicals in the late 1990s was high. InGen and Biosin were both at work in this field. Biosin had already achieved some success engineering a new pale trout under a contract to the Department of Fish and Game of the state of Idaho. The trout was easier to spot in streams and was said to represent a step forward in angling. At least it eliminated complaints to the Fish and Game Department there were no trout in the streams. The fact that the pale trout sometimes died of sunburn and that its flesh was so soggy and tasteless was not discussed. Barston was still working on that, and the door opened and Ron Meyer entered the room. Slipped into a seat. Dodgson had his quorum. He immediately stood. "Gentlemen," he said, "we're here tonight to consider a target opportunity." InGen. Dodgson quickly reviewed the background. InGen started up in 1983 with Japanese investors, the purchase of 3 Cray XMP supercomputers, the purchase of Isle Nublar in the Costa Rica, the stockpiling of amber, the unusual donations at zoos around the world, from the New York Zoological Society to the Ranthambore Wildlife Park in India. Despite all these clues, Dodgson said, we still had no idea where InGen might be going. The company seemed obviously focused on animals, and they hired researchers with an interest in past paleobotanists, DNA phylogeneticists, and so on. Then, in 1987, InGen brought an obscure company called Millipore Plastic Products in Nashville, Tennessee. This was an agribusiness company that had recently patented a new plastic with the characteristics of an avian eggshell. This plastic could be shaped into an egg and used to grow chick embryos. Starting the following year, InGen took the entire output of this Millipore plastic for its own use. Dr. Dodgson, this is all very interesting. At the same time, Dodgson continued, construction was begun on Isle Nublar. This involved massive earthworks, including a shallow lake 2 miles long in the centre of the island. Plans for resort facilities were let out of a high degree of confidentiality, but it appears that InGen has built a private zoo of a large dimension on the island. One of the dictators leaned forward and said, Dr. Dodgson, so what? It's not an ordinary zoo, Dodgson said. This zoo is unique to the world. It seems InGen has done something quite extraordinary. They have managed to clone extinct animals from the past. What animals? Animals that hatch from eggs and that require a lot of room in a zoo. What animals? Dinosaurs, Dodgson said. They're cloning dinosaurs. The consternation that followed was entirely misplaced, in Dodgson's view. The trouble with money men was that they didn't keep up. They had invested in a field, but they don't know what was possible. The fact that there had been discussion of cloning dinosaurs in the technical literature as far back as 1982, with each passing year the manipulation of DNA had grown easier. Genetic material had already been extracted from Egyptian mummies, and from the hide of a quagga, a zebra-like African animal that had been extinct in the 1880s. By 1985, it seemed possible that quagga's DNA might be reconstituted and a new animal grown. If so, it would be the first creature brought back from extinction. Solely by the reconstruction of its DNA. If that was possible, what else would also be possible? The mastodon, the saber-toothed tiger, the dodo, or even a dinosaur. Of course, no dinosaur DNA was known to exist anywhere in the world, but by grinding up large quantities of dinosaur bones, it might be possible to extract fragments of DNA. Formerly, it was thought fossilization eliminated all DNA. Now that was recognized as untrue. If enough DNA fragments were recovered, it might be possible to clone a living animal. Back in 1982, the technical problems had seemed daunting, but there was no theatrical barrier. It was merely difficult, expensive, and unlikely to work. Yet it was certainly possible if anyone tried. InGen had apparently decided to try. What they have done, Dodgson said, is build the greatest single tourist attraction in the history of the world. As you know, zoos are extremely popular. Last year, more Americans visited zoos than all professional baseball and football games combined, and the Japanese love zoos. There are 50 zoos in Japan, and more being built. And for this zoo, InGen can charge whatever they want. $2,000 a day, $10,000 a day. And there is the merchandising, the picture books, t-shirts, video games, caps, stuffed toys, cosmic books, and pets. Pets? Of course, if InGen can make full-size dinosaurs, they can also make pygmy dinosaurs as household pets. What child wouldn't want a little dinosaur as a pet? A little pattern animal for their own. InGen would sell millions of them. And InGen will engineer them so you can pet the dinosaurs to only eat InGen pet food. Jesus, somebody said. Exactly, Dodgson said. Sue is the centerpiece for enormous enterprise. You said these dinosaurs will be patented? Yes, genetically engineered dinosaurs can now be patented. The Supreme Court ruled out Spino Pet when? There's no Spino in Jurassic Park. Sucks to be you. The Supreme Court ruled on that in favour of Harvard in 1987. InGen will own its dinosaurs and no one can illegally make them. What prevents us from creating our own dinosaurs? Nothing. Except that they have a 5-year start. It'll be almost impossible to catch up before the end of the century. He paused. Of course, we could obtain examples of their dinosaurs. We could reverse engineer that and make our own with enough modifications to the DNA to evade their patents. We can obtain examples of their dinosaurs? I believe we can, yes. Someone cleared his throat. There wouldn't be anything illegal about this. Oh, no, Dodgson said quickly. Nothing illegal. I'm talking about a legitimate source of their DNA, a disgruntled employee, or some trash improperly disposed of. Something like that. Do you have an illegitimate source, Dr. Dodgson? I do, but I'm afraid there is an urgency to the decision. Because InGen is expecting a small crisis, and my source will have to act within the next 24 hours. A long silence descended over the room. The men looked at the secretary taking notes and the tape recorder and the table in front of her. I don't see the need for a formal resolution on this, Dodgson said. Just a sense of the room as to whether you should feel I should proceed? Slowly the heads nodded. Nobody spoke, nobody went on record, they just nodded silently. Thank you for coming, gentlemen. I'll take it from here. God, Jesus Christ, I didn't realise reading this much out loud told you. I love how I've dropped frames on a reading stream, but I didn't drop it on fucking yesterday's stream. Gotta love it. Louis Johnson entered the coffee shop in the departure building of San Francisco Airport and looked around quickly. His man was already there, waiting at the counter. Dodgson sat down next to him and placed the briefcase on the floor between them. Hate you, legit. You're late, pal, the man said. He looked at the straw hat Dodgson was wearing and laughed. What is this supposed to be, a disguise? You never know, Dodgson said, suppressing his anger. For 6 months, Doctor had patiently cultivated this man, who had grown more and more obnoxious and arrogant with each meeting. But there was nothing Dodgson could do about that. Both men knew exactly what the stakes were. Bioengineered DNA was, weight for weight, the most valuable material in the world. A single microscopic bacterium, too small to be seen by the naked eye, but containing the genes for a heart attack enzyme streptokinase or for ice miners, sure, which prevented frost damage to crops. Might be worth $5 billion to the right buyer. And the fact of life had created a bizarre new world of industrial espionage. Dodgman was especially skilled at it. In 1987, he convinced a disgruntled geneticist to quit Cetus for biosin and take 5 strains of engineered bacteria with her. The geneticist simply put a drop of each of her fingernails in one hand and walked out the door. But InGen presented a tougher challenge. Dodgson wanted more than bacterial DNA. He wanted frozen embryos, and he knew InGen guarded its embryos with the most elaborate security measures to obtain them. To attain them, he needed an InGen employee who had access to the embryos, who was willing to steal them, and who could defeat security. Such a person was not easy to find. Dodgson had finally located a suspectable InGen employee earlier in the year. Although this particular person had no access to genetic material, Dodgson kept up the contact, meeting the man monthly at Carlos and Charlie's in Sicily Silicon Valley helping him in small ways. And now that InGen was inviting contractors and advising visits to the island, it was the moment Dodgson had been waiting for, because it meant his man would have access to the embryos. Let's get down to it, the man said. I've got 10 minutes before my flight. You want to go over it again? Dodgson said. Hell no, Dr. Dodgson, the man said. I want to see the damn money. Dodgson flipped the laps of the briefcase and opened it up a few inches. The man glanced down casually. That's all of it? That's half of it. $750,000. Okay, fine. The man turned away and drank his coffee. That's fine, Dr. Dodgson. Dodgson quickly locked the briefcase. That's for all 15 species, remember? I remember 15 species, frozen embryos, and how am I going to transport them? Dodgson handed the man a large can of Gillette foamy shaving cream, which obviously is funny because it's Barbasol in the movies. That's it. Let me check my luggage. Press the top, he said. The man pressed it and a white shaving cream puffed into his hand. Not bad. He wiped the foam on the edge of his plate. Not bad. The can's a little heavier than usual is all. Dodgson's technical team had been assembling it around the clock for the last 2 days. Quickly he showed him how the inside worked. How much coolant gas is inside? Enough for 36 hours. The embryos have to be back in San Jose by then. That's up to your guy on the boat. Better make sure he has a portable cooler on board. Gillette didn't clearly want to sponsor the fools. Legit. But it's the same way the cars are different in this compared to obviously like the actual movies. And then you can't ever use the cars again. I'll do that. Now let's just review the bidding. The deal is the same. $50,000 on delivery for each embryo. If they're viable, an additional $50,000 each. That's fine. Just want to make sure you have a guy waiting on the boat at the east dock of the island Friday night, not the north dock where the big boats supply. The east dock. It's a small utility boat. You got that? I got it. When were you back in San Jose? Probably Sunday, the man pushed away from the counter. Dodge and Fred, you sure you know how to work that? I know, the man said. Believe me, I know. Also, Dodge said, we think the island maintains constant radio chat with InGen corporate headquarters in California, so look. I've got it covered, the man said. Just relax, get the money ready. I want it all Sunday morning in San Jose Airport in cash. I'll be waiting for you, Dodge said. Don't worry. Malcolm. Shortly before midnight, he stepped onto the plane at Dallas Airport, a tall, thin, balding man of 35 dressed entirely in black. Again, not as suave. Black shirt, black trousers, black sock, black sneakers. Ah, Dr. Malcolm, Hammond said, smiling with forced graciousness. Malcolm grinned. Hello, John. Yes, I'm afraid your old nemesis is here. Malcolm shook hands with everyone, saying quickly, Ian Malcolm, how'd you do? I do maths. He struck Grant as being more amused by the outing than anyone else. Certainly Grant recognised his name. Ian Malcolm was one of the most famous and new generation of mathematicians who was openly interested in how the real world works. These scholars broke with the Clostoid tradition of mathematics in several important ways. For one thing, they used computers constantly, and practiced traditional mathematician. Fuck me, I'm getting sleepy. Math bitches. Where am I? Fuck. Yeah, frowned on. For another, they worked almost exclusively with non-linear... I'm getting TB. In the emerging field called chaos theory. Finally, we're getting somewhere. We're on to chaos theory. For a third, they appeared to care that the mathematics described something that actually existed in the real world. And finally, as if to emphasize their emergence for the academia into the world, they dressed and spoke with what one senior mathematician called a deplorable excess of personality. In fact, they often behaved like rock stars. Malcolm sat on one of the padded chairs. The stewardess asked him if he wanted a drink. He said Diet Coke, shaken, not stirred. Humid Dallas air drifted through the open door. Ellie said, Isn't it a little too warm for black? You're extremely pretty, Dr. Sattler, he said. I could look at your legs all day. But no, as a matter of fact, black is an excellent colour for the heat. If you remember your black body radiation, black is actually best in heat. Efficient radiation, in any case, only wear two colours, black and grey. Ellie was staring at him, her mouth open. These colours are appropriate for any occasion, Malcolm continued, and they go well together. Should I mistakenly put on a pair of grey socks with my black trousers? But don't you find it boring to only wear 2 colours? Not at all, I find it liberating. I believe my life has value and I don't want to waste it thinking about clothing, Malcolm said. I don't want to think about what will I wear in the morning. Truly, can you imagine anything more boring than fashion? Professional sports, perhaps, grown men swatting little balls while the rest of the world pays money to applaud. But on a whole, I find fashion even more tedious than sports. Dr. Malcolm, Hammond explained, is a man of strong opinions. And mad as a hatter, Malcolm said cheerfully. You must admit, these are non-trivial issues. We live in a world of frightful givens. It is given that you will behave like this, given that you will care about that. No one thinks about the givens. Isn't it amazing? In the information society, nobody thinks. We expected to banish paper, but we actually banished thought. Hammond turned to Gennaro and raised his hands. You invited him. And a lucky thing too, Malcolm said, because it sounds as if you have a serious problem. We have no problem, Hammond said quickly. I always maintained the island would be unworkable, Malcolm said. I predicted it from the beginning. He reached into a soft leather briefcase. And I trust now we all know what the eventual outcome is going to be. You're going to have to shut this thing down. Shut it down? Hammond stood angrily. This is ridiculous. Malcolm shrugged, indifferent to Hammond's outburst. I brought copies of my original paper for you to look at, he said. The original consultory paper I did for InGen. The mathematics are a bit sticky, but I can walk you through it. Are you leaving now? I have some phone calls to make, Hammond said, and went into the adjoining cabin. Alright, Ellie and Al. No. I'm pretty sure. 1, because of the age difference, and 2, I'm pretty sure. I feel like there is more that comes. Again, I read this. The last time I listened to the audiobook was a long time ago. I'm pretty sure, like, there is he just doesn't like people. But no, in this one, I'm pretty sure that they might something happen, but again, it's been a while. It's been a good chunk. Where was I? Yes, well, it's a long flight, Malcolm said to the others. At least my paper will give you something to do. The plane flew through the night. Grant knew that Ian Malcolm had his share of detractors, and he could understand why some found his style too abrasive and his applications of chaos theory too glib. Grant thumbed through the paper, glanced at his equations. Gennaro said, Your paper concludes that Hammond's island is bound to fail. Correct. Because of chaos theory. Correct. To be more precise, because of the behaviour of system in phase space. Gennaro tossed the paper aside and said, Can you explain that in English? Surely, Malcolm said. Let's see where we have to start. You know what the non-linear equation is? No. Strange attractions? No. Alright, let's get back to the beginning. He paused, staring at the ceiling. Physics had a great success at describing certain kinds of behaviour. Planets in orbit, spacecraft going to the moon, pendulums and springs and rolling balls, that sort of thing. The regular movement of objects. These are described by what we call linear equations, and mathematics can solve these equations easily. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. Okay, Gennaro said. But there is another kind of behaviour which physics handles badly. For example, anything to do with turbulence, water coming out of a spout, air moving over an aeroplane wing, weather, blood flowing through the heart. Turbulent events are described by non-linear equations. They're hard to solve. In fact, they're usually impossible to solve. So physics has never understood the whole class of events. Until about 10 years ago, the new theory that describes them is called chaos theory. Chaos theory originally grew out of attempts to make computer models of weather in the 1960s. Weather is a big, complicated system, namely the Earth's atmosphere, as it interacts with the land and the sun. The behaviour of the big, complicated system always defied understanding, so naturally we couldn't predict the weather. But what the earlier researchers learned from computer models was that even if you could understand it, you still couldn't predict it. Weather prediction is absolutely impossible. The reason is that the behaviour of the system is sensitively dependent on the initial conditions. You've lost me, Gennaro said. If I use a cannon to fire a shell of a certain weight at a certain speed at a certain angle of inclination, and if it was to fire a second shell with the same weight speed, and angle, what will happen? The two shells will land at almost the same spot. Right, they're linear dynamics. Okay. But if I have a weather system that I start up with a certain temperature and a certain wind speed and a certain humidity, and if I repeat it with almost the same temperature, wind, and humidity, the second system will not behave the same. It will wander off and rapidly become very different from the first. Thunderstorms instead of sunshine. That's non-linear dynamics. They are sensitive to the initial conditions. Tiny differences become amplified. I think I see, Gennaro said. The shorthand is the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings and peaking, and weather in New York is different. So chaos is just random and unpredictable, Gennaro said. Is that it? No, Malcolm said. We actually find hidden regularities within the complex variety of a system's behaviour. That's why chaos has now become a very broad theory that used to study everything from stock market to rioting crowds to brainwaves during epilepsy. Any sort of complex system where there is confusion and unpredictability. We can find an underlying order, okay? Okay, Gennaro said. What is the underlying order? It's essentially characterised by the movement of the system within the phase space, Malcolm said. Jesus, Gennaro said. All I want to know is why you think Hammond's Island can't work. I understand, Malcolm said. I'll get there. Chaos theory says two things. First, the complex systems like weather have underlying order. Second, the reverse of that. The simple systems can produce complex behaviour. For example, pool balls. You hit a pool ball and it starts to careen off the sides of the table. In theory, that's a simple system. Almost a Newton's system. Since you can know the force imparted to the ball and the mass of the ball, and you can calculate the angles at which it will strike the walls, you can predict the future behaviour of the ball. In theory, you can predict the behaviour of the ball far into the future as it keeps bouncing from side to side. You can predict where it'll end up 3 hours from now. In theory. Okay, Gennaro nodded. But in fact, Malcolm said, it turns out you can't predict more than a few seconds into the future because almost immediately very small effects, imperfections on the surface of the ball, tiny indentations of the wood of the table start to make a difference. And it doesn't take long before they overpower your careful calculations. So it turns out that this simple system of a pool ball on a table has unpredictable behaviour. Okay. In Hammond's project, Malcolm said, in another apparently simple system, animals within a zoo environment that will eventually show unpredictable behaviour. You know this because of theory, Malcolm said. But hadn't you better see the island to see what he's actually done? No, that is quite unnecessary. The details don't matter. The theory tells me the island will quickly proceed to behave in unpredictable fashion. And you're confident of this theory? Oh yes, Malcolm said, totally confident. He sat back in his chair. There is a problem with the island. It's an accident waiting to happen. Isle Nublar. With a whine, the rotors began to swing in circles overhead, casting shadows on the runway of San Jose Airport. Grant listened to the crackle in the earphones as the pilot talked to the tower. They had picked up another passenger in San Jose, a man named Dennis Nedry, who had flown in to meet them. He was fat and sloppy, eating a candy bar, and there was sticky chocolate on his fingers and flecks of foil on his shirt. Nedry had mumbled something about doing computers on the island, and he hadn't offered to shake hands. Through the plexi bubble, Grant watched the airport concrete drop away beneath his feet, and he saw the shadow of the helicopter racing along as they went west towards the mountains. It's about a 40-minute trip, Hammond said from one of the rear seats. Grant watched the low hills rise up, and then they were passing through the intermittent clouds, breaking into sunshine. The mountains were rugged. Though he was surprised at all the amount of deforestation, acre after acre of denuded, eroded hills. Costa Rica, Hammond said, has the better population controls than any other countries in Central America. But even so, the land is badly deforested. Most of this within the last 10 years. They came down out of the clouds on the other side of the mountains, and Grant saw beaches of the west coast. They flashed over a small coastal village. By here, the pilot said. Fishing village. He pointed up north. Up the coast there, you see Cabo Blanco Preserve. They are beautiful beaches. The pilot headed straight out over the ocean. The water turned green and then a deep aquamarine. The sun shone on the water. It was about 10 in the morning. Just a few minutes now, and we should be seeing Isle Nublar. Isle Nublar, Hammond explained, was not a true island. Rather, it was a seamount, a volcanic upthrusting of rock from the ocean floor. Its volcanic origins can be seen all over the island, Hammond said. There are steam vents in many places, and the ground is often hot underfoot. And because of this, and also because of prevailing currents, Isle Nublar lies in its foggy area. As we get there, you'll see, there we are. The helicopter rushed forward low to the water. Ahead, Grant saw an island, rugged and craggy, rising sharply from the ocean. Christ, it looks like Alcatraz, Malcolm said. Its forested slope was wreathed in a fog, giving the island a mysterious appearance. Much larger, of course, Hammond said. 8 miles long and 3 miles wide at its widest point, in a total of some 22 square miles, making it the largest private animal preserve in North America. The helicopter began to climb and headed towards the north end of the island. Grant was trying to see through the dense fog. It's not usually this thick, Hammond said. He sounded worried. At the end of the north of the island, the hills were highest, rising up more than 2,000 feet above the ocean. The top of the hills were in the fog, but Grant saw rugged cliffs and crashing oceans below. The helicopter climbed above those hills. Unfortunately, Hammond said, we do have to land on the island. I don't like to do it, but it disturbs the animals. But it is sometimes a bit thrilling. Hammond's voice was cut off by the pilots. Starting our descent now. Hang on, folks. The helicopter started down and immediately they were blanketed in a fog. Grant heard a repetitive electronic beeping through his earphones, but he could see nothing at all. Then he began to dimly discern the green branches of pine trees reaching through the mist. Some of the branches were close. How the hell is he doing this? Malcolm said, but nobody answered. The pilot swung his gaze left and then right, looking at the pine trees. The trees were still close. The helicopter descended rapidly. Jesus, Malcolm said. The beeping was louder. Grant looked at the pilot. He was concentrating. Grant glanced down and saw a giant glowing fluorescent cross beneath the plexi bubble at its feet. There were flashing lights on the corners of the cross. Ooh, I've got my throat. The pilot corrected slightly and touched down on the helipad. The sound of the ropes faded and died. Grant sighed and released his seatbelt. We have to come down this fast that way, Hammond said, because of the wind shear. There is often a bad shear on the week, and, well, we're safe. Someone was running up to the helicopter, a man with a baseball cap and red hair. He threw open the door and said cheerfully, Hi, I'm Ed Regis. Welcome to Isle Nublar, everybody, and watch your step, please. A narrow path wound down the hill. The air was chilly and damp, and as they moved lower, the mists around them thinned, and Grant could see the landscape better. It looked, he thought, rather like the Pacific Northwest, the Olympic Peninsula. That's right, Regis said. Primary ecological is deciduous rainforest. Rather different from the vegetation on the mainland, which is more classical rainforest, but this is a microclimate that only occurs at elevation, on the slopes of the northern hills. The majority of the island is tropical. Down below they could see the white roofs of large buildings nestled along the planting. Grant was surprised. The construction was elaborate. They moved lower out of the mist, and now they could see the full extent of the island, stretching away to the south. As Regis had said, it was mostly covered in tropical forest. To the south, rising above the palm trees, Grant saw a single trunk with no leaves at all. It was just big, curving stump. Then the stump moved and twisted around to face the new arrivals. Grant realized he was not seeing a tree at all. He was looking up at the graceful, curving neck of an enormous creature rising 50 feet into the air. He was looking at a dinosaur. Welcome. My God, Ellie said softly. They were all staring at the animal above the trees. My God. Her first thought that this dinosaur was extraordinarily beautiful. Books portrayed them as oversized, dumpy creatures, but this long-necked animal had gracefulness, almost a dignity about its movements, and it was quick. There was nothing lumbering or dull in its behaviour. The sauropod peered alertly at them, made a low trumpeting sound, rather like an elephant. A moment later, a second head rose above the foliage, then a third, then a fourth. My God, Ellie said again. Gennaro was speechless. He had known all along what to expect. He had known about it for years, but he had somehow never believed it would happen. And now, here he was, shocked in silence, the awesome power of the new genetic technology, which he had formerly considered to be just so many words and an overwrought sales pitch. The power suddenly became clear to him. These animals were so big. They were enormous, big as a house, and so many of them. Actual damned dinosaurs, just as real as you could want. Gennaro thought, we're going to make a fortune on this place. A fortune. He hoped to God the island was safe. Grant stood on the path at the side of the hill with the mist on his face, staring at the grey necks craning above the palms. He felt dizzy, as if the ground was sloping away too steeply. He had trouble getting his breath, because he was looking at something he'd never expected to see in his life. Yet, he was seeing it. The animals in the mist were perfect apatosauruses, which is funny, because, again, we don't use apatosauruses in the movie until World. Perfect apatosaurs, medium-sized sauropods. He stunned mind made academic associations. North American herbivores, late Jurassic Horizon, commonly called brontosauruses. Again, brontosauruses is no longer any usual, normally the word people go for. First discovered by E.D. Cope in Montana in 1876. Specimens associated with Morrison Formation strata in Colorado, Utah, and Oklahoma. Recently, Berman and McIntosh had reclassified it as a Diplodocus based on skull appearance. Traditionally, Brontosaurus was thought to spend most of its time in shallow water. God, we really have gone through this playlist a lot. Which would help support its large bulk. Although this animal was clearly not in the water, it was moving much too quickly, the head and neck shifting above the palms in a very active manner. And a surprisingly active manner. Grant began to laugh. What is it? Hammond said, worried. Is something wrong? Grant shook his head and continued to laugh. He couldn't tell them that this was funny, that he had seen the animal for only seconds. But he had already begun to accept it, and he had used his observations to answer long-standing questions in the field. He was still laughing as he saw a fifth and a sixth neck crane above the palm trees. The sauropods watched the people arrive. They reminded Grant of oversized giraffes, and they had the same pleasant, rather stupid gaze. I take it they're not animatronic, Malcolm said. They're very lifelike. Yes, they certainly are, Hammond said. Well, they should be, shouldn't they? From a distance they heard the trumpeting sound again. First one animal made it, then the others joined in. That's their call, Ed Regis said, welcoming us to the island. Grant stood and listened for a moment, entranced. You probably want to know what happens next, Hammond was saying, continuing down the path. We've scheduled a complete tour of the facilities for you and a trip to see the dinosaurs in the park later this afternoon. I'll be joining you for dinner and will answer any remaining questions you may have then. Now, if you go with Mr. Regis. The group followed Ed Regis toward the nearest buildings. Over the path, a crude painted sign read, "Welcome to Jurassic Park." And that is the first part of this book.